Okay, we're on, folks. Good evening. Welcome to the Costa Mesa Planning Commission meeting for Monday, March 25th. I call the meeting to order and ask Commissioner Zick to lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance. Thank you, Commissioner Zick, very much. Julie, roll call, please.
Chair Jericho.
Here.
Vice Chair Harlan.
Here.
Commissioner Navarro-Woods. Here. Commissioner Zick.
Here.
Commissioner Colbert.
Present.
Okay, thank you. We have no announcements or presentations on the agenda tonight, and that brings us to public comment. To ensure fair and equal treatment of all who appear before the Planning Commission and to expedite city business, speakers may be limited to 3 minutes during public comments to speak on any item within the Planning Commission's jurisdiction, which is not on this evening's agenda. This time may be extended for good cause by the chair or a majority vote of the Planning Commission. Is there anyone wishing to speak tonight for public comment? Yes, ma'am.
So liberty and justice for all, that also includes the constituents and residents and business owners of Costa Mesa. One house away, one building over, New Beginnings, which is also Clean Path Recovery, South Coast Recovery. It has a whole bunch of names. The gentleman that owned it, name went out in my head. He's a convicted felon, drug dealer. He's the man who has the state license for this facility, Elite Care. I don't understand how the city of Costa Mesa allowed that building to reopen. This is really upsetting to a lot of people around here. Last week there was an overdose. We have a video of it, which I'll bring to the city council meeting. There's kids dying all over Costa Mesa, and we don't get to hear about it. But that place needs to be closed down right now. The residents brought it before the Planning Commission. We got it shut down. I don't understand, except that we know who they contribute money to during the election, like Lee Ramos and a sort of cast of characters. Look at the campaign contributions. That's your friend, right? Anyway, how come that is allowed to reopen? This neighborhood cannot tolerate this. What is going on down in the corner with the Lighthouse Church and the new homeless shelter and everything? Get rid of New Beginnings. They're dealing drugs right outside the gate. You can see it on any given day. This is not recovery. This is a cash cow building, and I'd like it shut down immediately. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else wish to speak during public comment tonight? This is on any item not on this evening's agenda. Okay. We'll close public comment and bring back up for Planning Commissioner comments. Commissioner Colbert, do you have any comments tonight?
No comments.
Okay, Commissioner Zick?
Nothing, sir. Thank you.
Okay, how about Commissioner Woods?
Just a quick comment. So last week I attended some master student presentations at UC Irvine, and so their projects were they looked at the west side and tried to figure out ways to sort of revitalize certain areas of the west side. And they're still preparing their report, and I'm sure that'll become available, and I can share that with anybody. But really the most compelling part of it was the graduate students interviewed a group of elementary school kids, and I believe it was Whittier Elementary or RIA, I can't recall. And they had them do an exercise where they imagined what their ideal city would look like. And then they sat down and talked to them. And it was really interesting, they come up with all these arts and crafts projects, but really what they wanted was really basic things. They wanted better lighting. They wanted more security. They were seeing drug deals on their corner. They wanted plants and open space. So something to think about when we are making decisions about the west side. Thank you.
Thank you. Vice Chair Harlan.
Nothing tonight.
Okay, and just a comment, I was disappointed I wasn't able to attend that seminar, Commissioner Wood, so I'm glad you went, and I appreciate your insights, and I would actually love to connect with you and get more detail on what they said, because I was very interested in going, and then I had some professional obligations I had to take care of that day, so I will be contacting you. Thank you very much for going. Okay, and so that will take care of Planning Commission comments. We have no consent calendar tonight, and that will bring us to public hearing. So Julie, I'd ask you to read public hearing number 1, please.
Public hearing item number 1, review of the zoning administrator's decision to approve a minor conditional use permit, ZA-18-71, to install a small cell facility on top of a Southern California Edison streetlight pole near 833 Cortez Street. This is a call to report any ex parte communications.
Okay, commissioners, any communications to report? Seeing none, Justin, it's your report.
All right. Good evening, Chair, Commissioners. Justin Arios, Assistant Planner. The request is a zoning application 18-71 is a request for a minor conditional use permit to install a small cell network on top of a Southern California Edison streetlight pole located within 500 feet of a residential zone. As a bit of background on wireless facilities, they are governed by the Federal Telecommunications Act of 1996, and at the state level, the industry is regulated by the California Public Utilities Commission. Both reduce impediments that can be imposed by local governments for the installation of wireless communication facilities. On January 14th of this year, FCC Order 18-133 became effective. The main effects of this order were related to application fees that can be assessed, the shot clock for the review of these applications, and the interpretation of an effective prohibition on these type of facilities. At the city level, Section 19-15 of the Municipal Code, adopted in 2010, provides criteria for telecommunication facilities located within the public right-of-way. Facilities that do not meet these criteria require approval of a minor conditional use permit. In 2018, the City Council adopted ordinance number 18-09, which amended Title 19 of the code to reference the small cell design guidelines, which are intended to assure visual compatibility and consistency with the design of these facilities and to encourage compliance with the design guidelines by forwarding minor conditional use permit requests that aren't consistent with the design guidelines to the Planning Commission for review. For small cell facilities, a minor conditional use permit is required if any of the following are met. The proposed small cell facility requires an MCUP because the proposed facility is located within 500 feet of a residential zone. And the table below provides a comparison of the existing pole, the proposed pole, and the city's requirements. This slide provides the handout of the city's small cell design guidelines for proposed small cell facilities related to the location, material and color, and form and placement of these facilities. The proposed small cell facility is located within the public right-of-way near the intersection of Cortez Street and Laurento Avenue. And here are some plans for the proposed facility. As previously mentioned, the proposed facility complies with the maximum height requirements. The antennas and supporting equipment is integrated within the equipment shroud, and there are no above-ground cabinets or equipment proposed. However, the proposed facility is located within 500 feet of a residential zone, therefore it requires a minor conditional use permit. On February 21st of this year, the zoning administrator approved zoning applications 1816, 1870, 1869, and 1871, all of which were requests for small cell facilities located within 500 feet of a residential zone. The proposed facilities were not located within the horizontal field of vision for residential areas, therefore the zoning administrator reviewed these applications. As part of the zoning administrator decision, one petition with 42 signatures in opposition was submitted expressing concerns with safety, security, privacy, property values, and public health. On February 28th, a request to review the action of the zoning administrator for zoning application 18-71 was filed. Excuse me. As stated in the request, it was filed to give the residents an opportunity to discuss their concerns before the Planning Commission. The existing and replacement streetlight poles are owned by SCE, in which case SCE dictates the height and material of the replacement poles, while the supporting small cell equipment varies in size and location based on the carrier's technology. Per U.S. Code, the city may not regulate the placement, construction, or modification of wireless service facilities in a manner that prohibits the provision of personal wireless service. However, local governments may require a design that is visually compatible with the surrounding areas. In addition, per U.S. Code, no state or local government may regulate the site of a wireless facility based on perceived health effects of RF emissions to the extent that the proposed facility complies with FCC regulations concerning such emissions. As it relates to the design guidelines, the proposed facility would be installed 3 feet from the existing pole, and the existing pole would be removed as soon as the new pole is activated. The small cell facility is proposed within a shroud mounted on top of a new streetlight pole and would be painted to match the streetlight poles in the surrounding area. As it relates to the form and placement, the replacement pole, streetlight pole, is 11.8 inches in diameter, and the proposed shroud is 14 inches in diameter, which is approximately a 1 to 1.2 ratio. The small cell facility is proposed within a shroud with the wires and cables located within the pole. As conditioned, the smallest and lowest visibility notification sign required by public agencies and utility companies will be utilized. The utility boxes would be located underground to reduce right-of-way impediments, and the overall height of the pole does not exceed the 35 feet, which meets code requirements. Next couple slides will give a couple photo simulations of the proposed small cell facility provided by the applicant. And pursuant to Title 13, Section 13-29G2 of the Municipal Code, this slide provides the required findings for any request for a minor conditional use permit, which the proposed small cell has been reviewed against and is also reflected in the draft resolution. Furthermore, staff's recommendation includes conditions of approval related to compliance with state and federal regulations, which includes providing an RF report once the facility has been installed. As previously mentioned, as part of the ZA decision, one petition with 42 signatures in opposition were submitted expressing concern with safety, security, privacy, property values, and public health. And as part of the noticing for the Planning Commission hearing and prior to the 12 p.m. noon deadline today, no public comments have been received. However, one email was sent after the 12 p.m. deadline, which also included the petition and signatures. The Planning Commission may choose to uphold, reverse, or modify the zoning administrator's decision to approve the project. Staff is recommending approval because the project meets the city's adopted design guidelines and is consistent with the findings for granting a minor conditional use permit as outlined in the municipal code. Therefore, staff is recommending that the Planning Commission adopt a resolution to find the project categorically exempt from the provisions of the California Environmental Quality Act and uphold the zoning administrator's decision to approve zoning application 18-71, subject to conditions of approval. That concludes my presentation, and I'm available for questions. The applicant is also here to answer any questions as well.
All right, thank you, Mr. Arias, for your report. Commissioners, any questions? I know, Commissioner Wood, you called this up, so I'll defer to you as to any questions you want to have to start off.
Okay, thank you. Thank you for going over the federal regulations regarding cell tower placement. I think it's important to just reiterate that over and over again, so our city residents can understand. However, you briefly mentioned horizontal fields of vision of residential areas, and can you dive into that a little bit more and clarify what that means and how you evaluate that as planning staff?
So the bottom image there provides kind of what the city was intending for what a direct view would encompass. Excuse me. And what the direct view was for any residential living area. The intent was for any proposed small cell facility that would be within a direct view, that those small cell facilities would be reviewed by the Planning Commission.
Okay, so if I'm understanding that correctly, I mean, you're showing a single-story residence right there, but let's say I live in a second-story apartment building, and I'm looking out my kitchen window, and the cell tower is directly in my field of vision. How would you evaluate that?
So at the time that the design guidelines were reviewed by the by the City Council, staff discussed its definition of direct view, and the intent was really to take into consideration the height that the facility was located at, and also considering that the distance from the pole of the adjacent residential uses. So the intent for direct view was really from abutting residences. And in order to see the facility at the height that it's proposed, the intent was really for kind of multi-story residences. It had to be within sort of easy natural direct view was the intent. That is something that staff is willing to review with the council at the time that we put forth the revisions to the design guidelines that are being proposed to comply with the FCC ruling, but that was the intent at the time that they were adopted.
Okay, and so currently you're just looking at abutting residences, but you're not looking from across the street?
Correct.
Okay, so before, we did receive an email, and it was sent, I think I wrote my notes on a different, it was sent by Brian Estrada. Planning staff and commissioners were copied on this email, and in it there's a photograph. It looks like it's a kitchen window, and it looks like there's a cell tower, or the proposed cell location it bifurcates their view. It's right in the middle of their kitchen window. So how would you evaluate that in terms of the horizontal field of vision criteria that you just described?
So we did receive that email, and we did take a look at the horizontal direct view in relation to that photo. And essentially it's because of what we just described. Because it's a first-story window, and because it's from a residence that is across the street, it didn't meet our definition of direct view. Having said that, the other thing I think it's important to note, the direct view consideration comes into play when a decision needs to be made whether to have the zoning administrator make a decision on the minor conditional use permit or the planning commission. Mm-hmm. The direct view consideration isn't necessarily relevant to any of the criteria for approval or denial, but it is very important in determining where staff sends the approval. So in the case of the residence that you're describing, staff felt that it did not meet the definition of direct view as we had intended it, so the zoning administrator made that decision. Since this item was called up for review to the Planning Commission, it's now being reviewed by the Planning Commission, which if staff had felt that direct view was interpreted as something different, then we would have forwarded it to the Planning Commission. So I guess my point is that direct view is really a consideration for the reviewing body, not for whether or not to approve or deny the application.
Okay.
Mr. Chairman,
Commissioner Zick.
so I have a number of questions I'd like to go through.
Okay,
I'd
please.
first like to thank my fellow commissioner for bringing this item up. We've had these small cell towers before us periodically, and we've kind of, even before the design guidelines were approved by council, we've sort of grappled with this topic from a number of different perspectives. So appreciate another opportunity to take a look at this. So in my mind, I was looking at this particular item and asking, why are we reviewing this? And what are we reviewing? And on what basis should we approve or deny the item? And so in looking at that construct, clearly we're reviewing this item today for one simple reason. A fellow commissioner called the item up for review. But it goes deeper than that, which raises a question in my mind. And I appreciate staff reminding me, because I apparently had forgotten, that if there was a question about the direct field of view, then that would put the item in front of us instead of the zoning administrator. So my first question is, are there any other distinctions that would differentiate whether the zoning administrator reviews these or whether they're put in front of the Planning Commission for approval?
Commissioner Zick, staff have pulled up on your screen essentially a flow chart of how staff makes the decision of what reviewing body makes the decision on a minor conditional use permit. I'd like our Assistant Planner, Justin Arias, to go through it a bit, and then if you have any questions beyond that, I can answer them.
Okay.
Okay, so as I mentioned earlier, for any facility located in the public right-of-way, it has certain criteria that would need to be met that would essentially exempt it from needing a minor conditional use permit. Let me pull up the. It also, so those include the location of the antenna and supporting equipment, whether or not it's screened, the cabinet for the equipment, whether it's above ground or in ground, the location as it relates to residential zone, and the height. So if it does comply, or if it meets all of the requirements, then no minor conditional use permit is needed and would go straight to an encroachment permit. If it does satisfy any of the following criteria listed, then it does require a minor conditional use permit, and then once that minor conditional use permit is submitted, staff would review based on the design guidelines and determine whether it complies with the design guidelines and whether it would need to be reviewed by the Planning Commission or straight to the zoning administrator. Once it's at both of those, the review criteria for the small cell facilities would be the same.
Okay, and I'm not sure if I caught where you mentioned the consideration of the direct view.
It's in between the center box and the box to the left. Essentially, once a minor conditional use permit is required, that minor conditional use permit is reviewed by the zoning administrator. And if the facility is within direct view of a residential living area, that decision is pushed to the Planning Commission. Also, if the facility does not comply with the design guidelines, staff will also push the facility to the Planning Commission for review.
Okay.
Those are the two considerations.
Okay, so let me ask you about a potential third, what I might call the elephant in the room. In this situation where staff receives correspondence from concerned residents, and in this case a petition with quite a large number of residents, would that factor into your thought process as to whether the approval would be at the zoning administrator level or whether the item would be put in front of the Planning Commission?
So part of the zoning administrator's review is to review comments received from the community as part of rendering their decision. So it's not necessarily the number of comments. If, however, the zoning administrator felt that the issues raised by the public comments were something that would be better reviewed by the Planning Commission, the zoning administrator does have the ability to push that decision to the commission.
Okay. And then in terms of what is being reviewed, understand the design guidelines and the considerations of compatibility and screening of the equipment, and if there's no above-ground cabinet. And those all, I think, relate pretty clearly to what the design guidelines are and the aesthetics of that. My question is regarding the third criteria that talks about the facility being located within 500 feet of residential. And with the prohibition of local or state government on dictating location, I'm wondering if you could elaborate on why the 500 feet to residential is important criteria.
So as staff brought forward the design guidelines to the council, the distance criteria was something that was discussed. 500 feet was chosen because that is the noticing requirement for minor conditional use permit. Staff did, and actually the telecommunication carrier companies requested that staff take a look at a lower distance requirement. But in the end, the council decided to stick with the 500 foot. Other than just being consistent with our noticing requirement, it doesn't have any other relationship.
Okay, I appreciate that. In this case, I understand the applicant is AT&T. My question is, so if AT&T installs a small cell tower on top of this pole, and then another carrier comes along, T-Mobile, Verizon, a number of them come along, and they have a need or a desire to also install small cell tower in this vicinity, how is that handled? Is it a first come, first serve? Or do new poles get installed in the parkway? How does that get resolved?
It is a first come, first serve. It's essentially an application-based request. So we have several applications from multiple carriers. They're looking at their coverage needs and they're selecting a pole and making that request through the city based on their coverage needs. So it is an application-based request.
Once an application is approved, for example, at this location, is there a time limitation that the applicant has for installing the small cell tower? Or are they essentially reserving that location in perpetuity?
So code requirement number 1 for these type of applications, the approval is valid for 10 years unless the indication of a condition imposed at the time of granting the applications or unless otherwise exempted under federal or state law.
Okay, so given that, do we have any, as a city, do we have any interest or concern about the idea of a carrier locking up a bunch of locations for 10 years and maybe essentially with that strategy locking out competitors?
We don't have a concern with that from a staff perspective. That 10-year time frame is something that was codified and was intended to provide some certainty for a telecommunications carrier once they received the city's approval. So we don't have concerns along those lines, no.
Okay, thank you. On page 4 of the staff report, it talks about this USC 332 and how the state and local governments may not regulate based on perceived health effects. To the extent, though, that the facility complies with FCC regulations concerning such emissions. And so my question is, who's determined that this site complies with the FCC locations? Would that be city staff or would that be the applicant?
So there are 2 times that RF emissions are reviewed. The first is that staff requires a detailed report regarding RF emissions as part of the application, and that report identifies the projected RF emissions from this facility based on modeling. And the second time that RF emissions are reviewed is after construction, and staff has included a condition of approval that requires a certified engineer to review RF emissions and document that they comply with the FCC's regulations.
Okay. I was curious on staff handwritten page 19 in the letter that was sent by Brian Estrada. There was a reference to a Washington Times article, and I'm not sure, Tarkin, if I'm asking you, but there was a reference to some lawsuits filed by various cities, and I'm particularly interested in just Los Angeles and San Jose, since they're in California, regarding FCC's new requirements. And I was wondering if we were familiar with the basis of those suits.
Commissioner Zick, the named cities, including City of Los Angeles, Portland, Oregon, and other cities on the West Coast, have filed suit challenging FPPC rule. However, the FPPC rule, in particular, Rule 22, which prohibits cities from establishing moratoria, except in very limited circumstances that aren't before us, stands until such a lawsuit is adjudicated. So there's been no preliminary order by the court or other ruling by the FPPC that would stay its orders or its ruling at this point.
Okay, thank you. And then I notice on handwritten page 41, the beginnings of this radio frequency electromagnetic energy compliance report. And on the cover page of that report, there's a note indicating that these results may be applied to other Costa Mesa locations. So did the applicant cite this report as the basis of their compliance? That's my first question.
They did. And if I can just add to, on the note, I believe the intent of that note is to communicate that, that this modeling of RF emissions, it could be applicable to multiple locations within Costa Mesa as long as the equipment design is the same. But the applicant is here and I'm sure could speak to the contents of the report more directly.
Okay, on page 47 of that report, it talks about because of the short wavelength of these services, the antennas require direct line of sight paths for good propagation and are typically installed above ground level. And the antennas are constructed to concentrate the energy towards the horizon, with as little energy as possible scattered towards the ground or to the sky. And as such, generally results in no possibility for exposure to approach the maximum permissible exposure limits, with the exception of areas directly in front of the antenna. And that caught my attention, because I'm thinking directly in front of the antenna, particularly for a two-story home, that would be of a particular concern. And not only, well, I guess then the next section on that same page says, all sites must be analyzed for RF exposure compliance. So rather than referring to the generalities of permissible exposure limits that are on the tables on page 46, I'm wondering if this particular location has been analyzed for RF exposure compliance.
So this technical report is for the purposes of providing modeled results for RF emissions. RF exposure compliance occurs once the facility is constructed and it ensures that it complies with FCC regulations. I think this is also a good question to pose to the applicant as well.
Okay. I'll give them advance notice of my next question by posing this one to you on handwritten page 48, the next page of that report. It's talking about, and I'm at the second to last paragraph on that page, it says, at the nearest walking surface to the AT&T antenna, the maximum power density generated is approximately 57% of the SCC's general public limit. That limit seems to be 30 minutes if I'm reading the table on page 46 correctly. And I don't imagine residents will be standing out under this pole for more than 30 minutes, but I found that to be noteworthy, maybe a point of concern. What I'm particularly concerned about, though, is this statement about the direct horizontal direction of the antenna. At this particular address, there's no second-story homes. And so maybe that concern is less. Until one of these homeowners decides they want to add a second story, all of a sudden that becomes a concern. My question is, if one of these homeowners submitted plans to add a second story to their home, who would catch the concern for analysis of the RF exposure? Would the city do that as part of a plan check review? Would the homeowner be responsible for doing that? Would Edison somehow receive a notification that construction was being done near a pole? Who would catch this potential hazard?
So generally speaking, staff reviews a request for second-story additions. We do look at the surrounding context, and that would include any facilities like this. From staff's perspective, we don't see a technical issue here for adding a second story, but that is something that we would take a look at if there was ever a second story addition proposal.
And who would pay for the roof view modeling for that?
At that point, this is something, is your question, would staff be in contact with the applicant, for example, to do modeling for this particular facility?
Yeah, would the homeowner be required to pay for that roof view modeling? Would the city require, in this case, AT&T to do that? How would that be handled?
This is typically something that either staff would retain its own technical expert or we would reach out with the utilities provider, in this case AT&T, and ask them for technical information to review.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Commissioners, any questions? Okay, I have just a couple of questions. And I just want to confirm some things. So I'm noting that on the existing light pole, the power source comes from a line connecting to the top of the pole. And if I'm understanding correctly, that line goes away and the power source will now be through the utility box underground. Am I correct on that?
That's correct.
Okay, so from a visual perspective, the above ground line is going to disappear.
Correct.
Okay, thank you. On the post-installation assessment of the equipment's compliance with FCC regulations, what happens if it doesn't meet those requirements? Is it taken down? Is it modified until it does meet the requirements? What happens?
It's typically modified until it meets the requirements. I haven't seen a situation where it was required to be removed.
Have we had an instance with the installation of microsites under an MCUP where approval was granted, the modeling report was provided, but the antenna did not meet those requirements?
So we have not had the completion of construction of any small cell facilities in the city up to
Really?
this point.
Wow,
That's
I'm
correct.
surprised.
So we haven't had that situation yet.
Okay. We've had a few of these before us.
Yes.
Didn't know it took that long. Okay. On line of sight. So I want to make sure I understand the plan, because I guess I'm coming at this from the assumption that assessment of line of sight and the aesthetics of this is a strictly subjective exercise. And so I want to make sure I understand the plans correctly. The existing pole is 28 feet. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Okay. Should an MCUP be granted and this new facility is constructed, the pole height will increase 3 inches. Am I correct there? 28.3?
That's correct.
Okay. And the pole width is more or less a foot, 11 foot 8 inches. I don't know if those poles taper or not, but the new pole would be 11.8 inches outside diameter. This is on handwritten page 82.
If you'll give us one moment to get there.
I just need, I'm assuming I'm right. I shouldn't do
that's
that. Okay, and then the shroud at the top of the pole, which with its addition increases the pole height by 3 inches. That diameter is 24 inches. Am I reading that correctly?
So on, let's see, handwritten page 80,
Yes.
it shows 14 inches.
Okay, so the shroud's 14, the pole itself is 12, so we're adding an inch off of the outer edges of the pole each side.
That's correct.
Okay.
I wanted to clarify one thing on the height, and Justin, please correct me if I'm wrong. The proposed pole is 28 feet 3 inches, but the shroud is on top of that.
Okay.
And so that would be 65 inches, so it's roughly 33 feet.
Okay,
tall.
then that's a significant difference. Okay, thank you for clarifying that for me. Okay. That's, yeah, I think, and Vice Chair Harlan and I are maybe a little confused on that. In handwritten page 4, the table shows height overall, 28.3, proposed pole. Okay, I see where you're getting it. So 65 inches for the shroud added to the 28 feet 3 inches. This is handwritten page 4 of the staff report.
That is my understanding, yes. If you'll continue with your questions, we'll look at the plans and
Okay.
ensure that that's correct and confirm.
All right, thank you. To follow up with some of Commissioner Zick's questions, so if somebody came in behind this particular applicant, we don't add additional equipment to a pole that already has a microsite on it, do we? That's not possible. They may be able to go to a pole next pole down the street, but we don't double up.
Correct. We do encourage co-location whenever possible, but typically in cases like this where you have antenna equipment that is contained within a very streamlined shroud, it's not possible.
Okay, thank you. I think that may do it, but give me a second. Okay. We can circle back and clarify that. Okay, I think that'll do it for me. I don't think Vice Chair Harlan or Commissioner Colbert had any questions, so I will open the public hearing and ask the applicant to come forward, please.
And Chair, if I may, while the applicant is coming up,
Yes,
just to
Ms. Lee.
clarify the height, we did double check on the actual drawings, and 28 3 inches is the top, including the shroud.
Oh, okay, perfect. Okay, so we're adding 3 inches and not 65
3
additional.
inches, yes.
Okay,
Thank you.
Yes, sir.
Good evening. My name is Franklin Gorosco. I'm here on behalf of AT&T and Ericsson. And just wanted to say that we're in support of the staff recommendation to uphold the zoning administrator's decision. The project does comply with the current code amendments and also your newly adopted design guidelines. So in that respect, I think the Planning Commission can render approval for this project. Just wanted to answer a couple of questions that you raised today. That had to do, I think, with the compliance and the report itself. The actual, as you mentioned, the center of the antenna, what we call it, the rad center of the antenna, is approximately 27 feet on this particular location. So in that scenario, it would typically be at the very top of a second-story building, rooftop. So, but in any event, the compliance report that we submitted, it's one that is applicable in all locations, as long as the antenna height on that report is the same or higher. Anything lower than that, obviously, we would actually come up with a different report itself. But as staff mentioned, we will be complying with the conditions for approval and providing that report that will show a post-construction analysis to show that it complies with FCC standards. The other question I believe you had, as far as the multiple carriers in this location, as staff mentioned, it's not feasible to do that. It's not allowed by the SCE on any of these poles, co-location. There's only one carrier per pole, so if another carrier would be interested in that same general location, they would actually have to go to a different pole in that same area. Also wanted to mention that we have already several projects that have been approved by the zoning administrator in a similar situation, and those are actually in process of getting the encroachment permits, and then we'll be in construction in a short time. AT&T is eager to get these networks going as it actually alleviates the network of the larger macro cells and provide concentrated signal to the residents and people that use the AT&T service for that purpose. Is there any questions you have? I'm available to answer them.
Okay, thank you, sir. And I was remiss, I have to do some housekeeping real quick. I want to make sure that you review the conditions of approval in the staff report and you agree with them?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. Commissioners, any questions of the applicant? Commissioner Zick.
Thank you, sir. So I think there were two primary areas of interest that I have regarding these small cell towers, and one is largely satisfied, and that has to do with the design guidelines and what I'll call the visual aesthetics. Mm-hmm. But the other area of concern that I have, and we haven't heard from the residents, we will soon, and it may or may not be a concern of theirs, but it is of mine, and it is making sure that I understand the adequacy of the analysis that goes into the RFEME. And when I look at the report that was given to us that talks about the concerns or the areas of concern that need to be analyzed, and you referred to example the height being 27 feet. Certainly somebody standing on the floor of a second story of a house would have their head at a level lower than that. But I don't know if that means that if I jump, now I have to be concerned. an analysis would tell me to what extent I need to be concerned. Your report gives me some areas where I have a little bit of concern, where it talks about the maximum permissible exposure being 6 minutes on one table, 30 minutes on another table, and that's standing presumably at the ground level. And so then I'm thinking to myself, so if I'm in the second story of my house, close to one of these towers, and that happens to be my office, and I work there all day long, to what extent does there be an accumulation of this to where I should be concerned? Because the maximum permissible exposure is given in minutes. And so presumably if I'm only exposed for a shorter period of time, then what the analysis says is there's no concern. But if I'm there a long period of time, now I am concerned. So my real question is, especially since you haven't done completed any installation yet in the city, I don't know what a completed roof view report looks like. So I really don't know how comfortable to be with this area. But I'm uncomfortable based on what is in this report that says each individual site must be analyzed for exposure compliance. And that although there isn't a second story on any of the homes next to this location, does that preclude them or give them cause for adding a second story? There is a second story next to the, near the house on Presidio. The location on Pine Creek there's also 2-story, but that's rental property. That doesn't mean that there's no safety concern. That just means the occupant of that apartment probably didn't get noticed and wouldn't have been here or wouldn't have been concerned. So could you address my concern about the efficacy of your analysis?
I will try. Basically, the report itself provides 2 different levels of analysis. One is for the general public, and the other one is for people that actually work directly in front of the antennas. The report also, I believe, mentions in there that those are the analysis that they do is basically on a worst case scenario, meaning the operation of the antennas at all times at full extent, which is typically not the case in most scenarios. And so the safety distance that those reports typically issue or provide is to approximately, between 3 to 5 feet from the antenna itself. So as you are further away from the antenna, from the face of the antenna, the amount of energy reduces quite substantially with distance. And so to answer your question, there wouldn't be any concern necessarily if house is set back from the property line about approximately 20 feet, which is typically the setback of a residential home at that location. I may also want to add that this is not the very first installation necessarily in Costa Mesa. Obviously, you have several other much larger macro locations that are in similar heights as well as in proximity to existing office areas as well, and perhaps some areas residential.
Thank you, sir.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Commissioner Woods.
Hi, thanks for coming tonight. I just have a quick question.
Yeah.
Oftentimes, what we'll see included in these applications is a coverage map, and it's usually kind of color-coded that shows where the gaps in coverage are, and it provides some additional sort of supplementation for the carrier to demonstrate that, we have a gap in coverage here. We need to cite a cell tower location to make up for that gap. Mm-hmm. I don't see anything like that provided. Did you provide anything like that to planning staff, or how specifically did you choose this area? What kind of gap in coverage did you guys think is occurring here?
Sure. I may want to just again reiterate that this is not necessarily a coverage objective situation. is that we're trying to offload the traffic from other much larger macro sites. So in essence, what we're trying to do is with these small cells is provide rapid data communications to the users in close proximity to where they use their devices the most. And so in order to be able to reduce the traffic from the larger areas that are further away, it's not really feasible to be able to build the same type of macro sites within the different communities. So one of the areas that we looked into is obviously the deployment of the small cells, which are low power antennas, but they're able to actually connect it to fiber communications, allow that fast method of communication between the user and the actual network itself. So we do have coverage maps necessarily, but again, it is not intended for areas that we lack in coverage. Obviously, there is a significant gap in actual data communications, which is basically we're trying to densify the signal in these areas. So we did provide a relative general map that shows the locations of all the current small cells that we are proposing within the city. As I mentioned before, there are several other ones in similar situations that have already been approved by the zoning administrator, and we're in process of getting those in line for construction.
Okay, all right, thank you.
Commissioner Colbert.
Thank you for the presentation and coming tonight. Quick question. Is there a process when you're talking about offloading the capacity of other or the network gaps, what would be the number of nodes needed within the city of Costa Mesa to satisfy that communication gap? Is there a number that you have determined that would satisfy those things?
I don't have a number for you because really it really depends on the analysis of the engineers and also the information as to where the highest amount of usage is. So you would find these obviously right now. If you look at the small cell map network that I provided, there a lot of them actually are centered in and around the fair in all that area. We're trying to, I think the goal is to be able to provide these types of small cells in areas where there's high density residential, in areas where there is commercial, and obviously in other areas where, in this case, in single family residential, where there's also the need for the data communication, faster data communication for future use.
Okay. Are there opportunities for when nodes when you are potentially thinking about co-locating, and I know someone mentioned that earlier, in the case that two networks do co-locate on potential light pole, and I know that won't happen or can't happen, but in the case that it does happen, are RF emissions then evaluated?
Again, as I mentioned before, the distance as you move away from the antenna dissipates quite substantially. I'm not an engineer, but my understanding of the analysis in the report is that that would be the case. So if you had another pole, which is approximately maybe another 100 feet away from the same location, obviously you wouldn't have to do an analysis that combines both of them. You do have to do an analysis whenever you have collocation on the same structure itself. And I think that's something that I'm not sure if has been done before, but I mean, usually that's the case. We do analyze the existing carrier and the proposed installation that's being on the same tower, but not in this case. And again, these are much lower power antennas than you would normally find in the collocation situation.
Okay, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
Vice Chair Harlan.
This is actually a quick question. In comparison between a macro site and a small cell relative to radio frequency and electromagnetic radiation, what is the difference? Is it 5-fold, 10-fold, 100-fold?
Good question. It's the the amount of, I guess, the wattage for these small cells is less than 100. And I think that's the case with the larger cells, but that's per antenna. So usually you have, several sectors or several antennas on a typical macro site, usually about 12 antennas per 4 per sector. But I think it's actually it's substantially lower, so 10%, I would say. Mm-hmm.
Thank you. And I just have one other question. I think, if I remember correctly, Commissioner Harlan, on a previous application maybe a year ago, I remember receiving some technical information that the range of these microsites is like only a couple of 100 feet. So I think that's why they have to put them in so much frequency or closer together.
Right.
I have a question. I don't have any questions for you, but I do have one more for staff. So when we open the public hearing, after everyone speaks, if you wish to come back up, I'll call you back up.
Great, thank you.
I have one more question for staff. In the event that, in this particular instance, there is no second story, but somebody wanted to do a second story addition later, if that second story addition were approved and constructed, would that nullify this conditional use? Would that nullify this permit for a small cell, or does that, does the MCUP go away?
The MCUP runs with the land, so it does not go away, or it runs with the facility, so it does not go away.
Okay. Okay. I will open to public comment. Anyone wishing to speak on this item, please come forward. And if you wouldn't mind, although it's not required, provide your name and address for the record. It makes it easier for our dear Julie, who takes copious notes on these.
Yeah, hi,
proceedings.
good evening. My name is Brian Estrada, resident of Costa Mesa, 2826 Portola Drive. Thank you, commissioners. Commissioner Woods, thank you also for calling this item up for hearing today. We appreciate it, and to staff for all the detail that they've put in. I wanted to start with just a couple of questions and comments into some of the discussion that has taken place up to this point, and then I'll get into a few other points I had. But one thing we'd like to see is what's the comprehensive plan for cell towers in Costa Mesa? This gentleman said he's not sure of how many towers are being proposed. I find that hard to believe, that the industry doesn't have some projections of what they see rolling out over the next few years. Costa Mesa, I did a quick calculation, has over 40 million square meters. If these towers are supposed to be put in every couple hundred feet or every 100 meters, it could be a lot. Hundreds, are we talking hundreds, thousands, 10,000s of towers coming in? I think that's an important question to consider beyond just this one application. The city's done a great job in addressing the design aspects and the compatibility with residential neighborhoods. And so I've been struggling on how to present to you, but I feel obligated to really just address the elephant in the room, as someone said, and that is public health. And that we should not be silenced by outdated federal legislation on the issue when the global community has accepted, the global medical and scientific community, for a majority part, has accepted that there is, in fact, biological effects associated with long-term low levels of exposure to radio frequency radiation. The U.S. National Toxicology Program, that's the largest study to date. It's over $25 million that was conducted by the U.S. federal government over several years, showed correlations between heart and brain cancers and cell phone radiation. Numerous other studies have been conducted to show these potential health effects. And frankly, as residents, we're alarmed and we're concerned. We're concerned because we have young children in this neighborhood, and we want to know about what the potential risk is of growing up under these cell phone towers. You talk about 6 minutes or 30-minute exposures. We're talking about 30 years of living under these things or longer. The city, I understand the position. I understand the federal law that prohibits local jurisdictions' control over this matter. But that doesn't take away my right to protect myself and to protect my family and to protect my property. Those are inalienable constitutional rights that I have. And if these towers pose a potential health threat, we as citizens and you as a city and as a governing body have the obligation to ask that question, regardless of what the implications may be at the federal level. That was my 3 minutes.
Well timed. Thank you for your comments. Yes, anyone else wish to speak to this item? Yes, ma'am.
Hi, my name's Ashley Estrada, Brian's wife. In addition to things he's mentioned and some comments in regards to what was talked about already, the 30 minutes within so many feet, we have neighbors who live across the street from these cell towers, and we spend hours outside with our fetuses in our bellies and our babies running around and kids living under these poles. And I have lots of studies that show that these small cell towers were placed on fire stations, and there was brain studies done after 5 years, and it showed that there were symptoms with the firefighters: headaches, memory problems, sleeping problems, depression, anxiety, and their brain scans were actually abnormal, and they were able to remove these from fire stations, as well as schools. There was cell towers placed in schools or near schools, and there was children getting cancer, and they got those removed. You can't prove that that was directly related, but they believe that it was. And those 42 signatures I got was very quick and easy. Didn't have a lot of time with having a toddler and a full-time job. There was lots of other neighbors too, in addition, that have expressed concerns that, in addition to the 42. And as far as the 10%, the small cell tower being only 10% less powerful than the big ones, that doesn't seem like that much smaller to me. Seems like having these every 500 feet or whatever, times however many there are, that really adds up to the EMF that we get, because they're even at extremely low frequency magnetic fields. There's proof, there's been studies done, that it's possibly carcinogenic, which means causes cancer. And as far as the two-story not being around, there's actually this location at 833 Cortez, directly across the street is a two-story house. And 4 doors down is another two-story house that I know of because I live there and I'm on that street all the time. And so I just wanted to mention that there actually is one right across the street. And I have more information if you'd like to hear about the studies that have shown the health effects.
If you'd like to, ma'am, you can hand it to Julie over here and we'll get copies of that. Thank you for providing that. Thank you. Anyone else wish to speak to this item? Yes, sir. Please come forward. Good evening.
Good evening. My name is David Lefstein. I'm a resident within 500 feet of this permitted facility. My address is 824 Cortez Street, and I just have 4 quick points I'd like to address. So first and foremost, like I said, I am within 500 feet of this. Your decision will greatly affect my life and my small and young family. So the address that the lady before me spoke of is 817 Cortez Street. That person is actually, the house is actually for sale. It does have a 2-story structure with 2 bedrooms, a master on the 2nd story. So I can't speak to if that's within 500 feet, but it's across the street from me on this street of Cortez. So as it's on the market right now, I'm sure this person that's going to be buying this has no idea this is even happening. That's something that they might never even think about. Secondly, like in that, they showed an image that had colors of the houses. It was orange and blues. There's 13 kids that live within that area. Out of that, 10 of those are under the age of 5 and under. So on that, I'd like to leave just 2 quick points. So the National Toxicology Program study, which was from February of this year, stated that it found clear evidence of tumors in hearts of male rats, evidence of tumors in the brains of male rats, evidence of tumors in the adrenal glands of male rats, and that child's brains absorb 2 times the radiation, which is this picture right here. So that's alarming to me. I have a young family. We don't want, there's no reason for us to feel threatened in our own homes. And so I just want to finish on this. The EPA has stated repeatedly that the human exposure guidelines that were adopted by the FCC on August 6, 1996, are protective only against shocks, burns, and gross heating, and do not protect against chronic and low-level exposure. Feels like things are outdated. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Anyone else? Yes, ma'am.
Hi, my name's Alexandra Martin. I'm here on behalf of Southern California Edison, and I just wanted to address a couple of the questions you were asking earlier about, how we choose the sites, how we know whether we've reserved them, how long they can keep them without building, that kind of stuff. So all applications for small cell streetlight applications come through me at Edison by all the carriers, and we have several, not just AT&T and Verizon. In your city, I have approximately 60 active applications for lights. Edison owns all the lights in your city, except possibly your intersection lights. So of all of the lights in your city, and you have thousands, we have approximately 60 active applications. That does not include their 5G applications. Those haven't been submitted yet, but based on the percentages of the applications coming in, it'll be progressive and over several years. But we review the applications based on photographs first, and we look to see where is that pole located. Is it in a location that can be replaced within that 3-foot separation so that the light can remain lit, the existing one, until we replace the new pole and it's ready to light. Are there utility lines? This pole is overhead fed. It will be replaced with a concrete underground fed light, so that overhead will go away. The carrier bears the cost of all of those improvements. We do have one pole at the moment. It comes in 2 heights, the 23 feet, which is this one, and a 29-foot 6-inch, which is more on arterial streets. It's a round concrete pole. It's a little bit larger than your existing poles. And then the carriers apply, whoever applies first is the one that winds up with that pole. We do not allow more than one carrier on a cell pole because it can't fit, basically. None of their equipment can fit with more than one carrier. So we have limited it to one. You guys had a couple other questions. I can't remember exactly, but if they do not do something, if I have inactivity for more than 6 months, they get notified that that site is in danger of being canceled. So even if they have a zoning approval from you, if they don't do anything with it, we will cancel their site because we don't want to keep open applications on our site either. It basically encumbers an Edison asset. So it does take a while to get the site built. After you approve it, they have to get a streetlight authorization form signed by the jurisdiction in order to get into the utility to get a final utility design for their in-ground service as well as the utility for your new light pole. So that takes approximately 2 months, and then it takes 12 weeks to order the pole. So it isn't a very short process, which is why you probably haven't seen any built that you've already approved. But if I have 6 months of inactivity, we will cancel the project.
Okay, thank you very much. Anyone else? Yes.
So first of all, thank you, Ms. Woods, for pulling this up. I mean, I really applaud when the young families get together and come and get involved. This is fantastic. And plus, they're pretty well educated, aren't they? And they did their homework, so I hope you listen to them. And don't get intimidated by AT&T and the Edison company. These people should come first. They're young families. I'd appreciate if for a change, the residents' constituents, not just an even balance, I'd like us to come first. And first of all, They said Boeing 747s were safe right now, didn't they? I'm not joking. I know it sounds funny, but hey, they keep telling us everything's safe, right? Oh, Oxycontin was safe. This is safe. This is safe. No, I don't believe this is safe, and I completely resent Willa, the zoning administrator that just passed this, without letting everybody know or giving them a chance to speak. None of these cell phone things should be ever passed without coming before the Planning Commission, because the surrounding residents have the right to know. And how do I know? Because I live near one of the first ones that was put up in the city without any notice to the residents by Jim Righeimer and Gary Jabara and Mobilite's cell phone. It's on the corner of 20th and Tustin, if you guys want to go look at it. I mean, we didn't even have any zoning in 2015 or whatever year I came. People, they said, well, what are you so worried about? I said, do you read the studies? Do you read the health studies? The city had no plan. And by the way, Mr. Harlan and Mr. Erical, didn't you recuse yourselves from the initial vote the first time around with cell phone towers because of whatever clients that you had? So I guess you don't have any cell phone clients now, or property people in your life that get involved with this and profit from this. Think of the money that Edison Company is making off of this. Of course they're going to get up here and tell you it's completely safe. I don't believe it's safe. I believe the fire department. Did you know that right now in our city and almost everywhere in California, they're not allowed to put these on the fire department buildings because of what happened with the studies? So why do you ignore the science? Why don't you listen to the residents? And there's other places to put these things besides the telephone poles and the light poles. Put them on top of the commercial buildings. Let the local business people make some money instead of the Edison Company. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, anyone else wish to speak on this? Okay, I will close public comment and ask the applicant if you wish to come back up and offer any final comments or any rebuttal comments to what you heard. Okay, very good. So then, commissioners, any final questions of staff? Okay, I have one. This will probably go to Tarquin. So if we were to deny, if we were to overturn the zoning administrator's approval based on the record we heard this evening, concerns about health and safety, what would be potentially the recourse of the applicant? Do they file a lawsuit? Do we test that in court? And if that's the case, my second question is there case law where a jurisdiction challenged FCC regulations as to the adequacy of the standards? And if there any case law that has a jurisdiction prevailing over those standards or over that health and safety aspect that the FCC has set forth?
Chair DeAricol, the applicant's first recourse would be to appeal the Planning Commission's decision to the City Council. Should the City Council, should the Planning Commission overturn the zoning administrator's decision. I'm not aware of any controlling case law that has overturned the FCC's determination that the city's local jurisdictions cannot take health and safety concerns into consideration.
Okay. 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 Commissioners, any other questions? And I will, oh yeah, Commissioner Woods.
I have one more question. So what we're hearing from the residents is, health concerns, and we're also, one of them included a photograph that said that it was in their line of sight. So how is that a viable or reasonable finding for a denial based on the review criteria that's been established by the city?
Commissioner Woods, this body would have to make a finding based on evidence in the record that the design is inharmonious or not compatible with the design of the surrounding area.
Okay. Anything else? Yeah. Commissioner Zick, you have something? Or
yes, I do. Just one quick question. So on this RF exposure compliance analysis that is required by the FCC and which presumably AT&T performs. My question is that performed based on the actual emanations from the specific installation, meaning that analysis is done after the installation, or is that an analysis that's done essentially theoretically based on the equipment that has been spec'd for this installation?
The report that we require is an actual, not a projected. As we said, we haven't had one constructed yet, so we haven't yet received one, but that is our expectation.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, and I'm sorry to belabor this. One last question. So I think Mr. Strada actually asked a question that's, I think, important and I think is worth answering about a citywide comprehensive master plan or plan for these microsite towers. My immediate line of thought is a comprehensive plan would necessarily, it would seem to me, cap these. You can only have so many, otherwise, why have it? I guess, and maybe it would say there has to be a certain distance requirement, and so whatever a comprehensive plan would look like, it seems intuitive to me that would start running afoul of, apart from line of sight issues, establishing arbitrary regulations around a comprehensive plan for microsites that might run afoul of the same federal regulation that prohibits us from. Do you know of any other cities that have microsite master plans?
So we did some research into this when we were first preparing the design guidelines, and we did not find that there were any cities, and we did look in Orange County specifically, who had adopted a master plan in the way that you're describing it. We did also pull a stakeholders meeting together and talked with each of the carriers for small cell facilities and specifically asked about sort of master plan level information. Some carriers do provide, and AT&T is one of them at the request of staff, sort of facilities that are planned as they know it today. But the feedback that we received from the carriers is that they are consistently reevaluating needs based on demand, and that any master plan that they could come up with to the best of their ability would essentially be good for a few years and no more than that. So the data that we are asking for is constantly changing. We presented that information to the council at the time of the design guidelines presentation. Council had the same question as to a master plan, and it was really determined to be something that was just infeasible for this industry.
Okay, thank you for your answer. Seeing no other questions, I will close the public hearing and bring the matter back up to the dais with respect to any comments or motions. Commissioner Woods.
I have a couple comments.
Okay.
So I requested the review because we had so many residents that expressed opposition to this, and usually the public doesn't even get involved. So whenever I see folks that do and they have some concerns, I think it's better to just bring it out and talk about it openly. Line of sight I thought that line of sight could be a potential factor to consider more thoroughly, but we've learned from the staff report and from staff conversations today that federal regulations limit how a city can regulate the placement of these cell towers. And I hear you guys. I am totally on board with reducing EMFs. I'm such a freak about it. I don't even have an alarm clock in my bedroom because I'm super sensitive to it. I can feel it when it's on. I don't allow my kids to even touch an iPhone Monday through Friday. They're allowed to Saturday and Sunday for 30 minutes, and I set a timer, and that's it. What's more harmful, actually, is just holding a cell phone in your pocket. And I think I noticed cell phones in your pockets as you were walking away. The California Department of Public Health has indicated that that's really the best way, really the most most meaningful way that you can limit your radiation exposure is by just not having a cell phone or not keeping it in your pocket. And when you do have it in your pocket, make sure you have it in airplane mode. Yeah, radiation drops off significantly from a cell tower the more you move away from it. And especially with these small cell towers, it's my understanding that as soon as you get about 5 or 6 feet away, that EMF drops off significantly, and it's just not harmful to you anymore. Now, I agree that there isn't a lot of good studies out there, and I think that there isn't any information on cumulative effects, and that's something I think about all the time, where my family is and where we recreate and what we do. And so we actively choose, to be out in open spaces away from technology. And we only have one television in our house. We only have one computer. We really, really work to limit the amount of radiation exposure we have in our own home. We have a smart meter, but I tried to fight Edison on that one, and I lost pretty quickly. But fortunately, it's located in a part of our home that are on a wall that we don't spend too much time there. So I am going to, I guess I'll start by making the motion to uphold the zoning administrator's decision and approve zoning application 18-71 subject to the conditions of approval, and find that the project is categorically exempt from the provisions of the California Environmental Quality Act for CEQA guidelines section 15303 class 3 for new construction. And again, I mean, it's really just up to your own sort of user habits to figure out how you're going to limit your own exposure. But, this isn't, the public health issue isn't something that we can rule on. I mean, it's really something about, you really just got to contact your public officials, see if there's a state senator or a state assembly person or a congressman that would be willing to get behind it at a federal level, because that's where the regulations need to be explored and changed.
Thank you, Commissioner Woods, for your motion. Is there a second?
Second.
Seconded by Commissioner Zick. Any comments on the
Mr. Chairman?
Commissioner Zick and then Commissioner Colbert.
So I'll be supporting the motion. I agree with our restriction on ruling based on perceived health effects. I think worrying about things probably will cause you more damage than maybe what the actual consequence would be. But that said, I'm an engineer, and so you got to prove it to me. And I want to see the analysis. I want to see the emanations that are going to occur at that location to those properties that are in close proximity to it. I want to see that report. And what we learned tonight is that report will be done once the equipment is installed, so you see the actual emanations from the actual piece of equipment that is located near your property. Now, of course, for you to get that report, you're going to have to stay in touch with the city, because I am not sure it's going to be mailed to you. But that's going to show you what the actual emanations are and what the actual risk is to your home. And then you can compare that to the maximum permissible exposure limits that have been set by the government. And you can then begin to make your own more informed judgment as to what your real risk of exposure is. So I support the industry. I support what they're doing. I support what the FCC says that limits our ability to control installations. But I also recognize that you have the ultimate information at your disposal, which is a real analysis of a real installation next to your real property. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Commissioner Colbert.
Brian, Ashley, and David, I'd just like to thank you for all three coming and speaking against this. And I do want to recognize that while I am in strong support of the public health concerns that you do have, I do not believe that we are silenced, because we have all spoken out and expressed opinion against this. However, we are guided by particular laws and ordinances in which we have to fall in line with, and unfortunately, this is one of those periods in which we have to do so. As a former planner, I approved multiple cell towers in Texas However, during those approval processes, we had more regulation, and I look forward to the continued growth or potential review of this as technological advances take place in the city. There's obviously demand in your neighborhood, which has, driven this need for this node in this area. So that's something, but I just want to simply say that I will be in support of this, but I do want to just state that I hear and I strongly sympathize with your comments.
Thank you, Commissioner Colbert. Vice Chair Harlan.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I will admit that when I first saw this item brought before the Planning Commission, I emitted somewhat of a groan, largely because I like to trust staff in their analysis. But I do want to thank Commissioner Navarro-Woods in particular for, one, bringing this up, because I think it's an important issue, and I think it was good to have our public weigh in on this. So I will rescind my groan. But secondly, I think that it also gave us as a body another opportunity to go through some of the issues that were raised, particularly public health. And while I agree with my fellow commissioners, sometimes it seems to be an issue far beyond our scope, I don't think anyone here in this body wants to do anything deliberately to jeopardize anyone's personal safety or security. I think that's implicit in our decisions, but sometimes it takes an issue like this to kind of bring it to the forefront. As for the specific matter, I would find it very hard to make findings against the design aspect of this. I think it's pretty clear that this is consistent with our design guidelines, and in fact, some ways is an improvement. As the chair noted, there's a removal of an overhead line. I think that actually is a visual improvement for the area. But on the second issue of public health, I did a little research partly while we were having our discussion tonight, and used in my trusty cell phone here to get some information. I looked at the American Cancer Society's website because I was very curious to see what they would say. And much to my surprise, they do have a fair amount of information about, do cell phone towers cause cancer? And they actually don't necessarily opine that they do. In fact, the information is to the contrary. So I take this debate seriously, but I also recognize that we do have some limitations, and I don't know that we necessarily want to invite a lawsuit here. As Commissioner Colbert said, we do have some legal restrictions. So I think in sum, I'm going to support the motion. I think it was a good discussion tonight, and I do appreciate the fact that people did come out. I think your concerns are genuine, but in this case, I think I'm going to support the zoning administrator's determination.
Thank you, Vice Chair Harlan. I just, first of all, I want to also thank Commissioner Woods for bringing this forward. I also want to express my pride in all of you for the clearly weighty deliberation you gave this, both in preparation before the meeting and at the meeting. I think you all asked great questions. I appreciate your concerns with respect to the health and safety. These are just one of those issues where the federal government ties our hands and we can say, well, that's fine, but we're going to go ahead and deny this particular application. And there's been no direction from the city council, the elected leaders of the city, to say, yes, let's challenge these regulations. And I'm kind of loath to get ahead of them on that particular policy. If they decide, you have elected leaders, if you want to say to them, look, these are regulations and standards that were put in place in 1996 and we think they're outdated, I would contact your mayor and I would contact your mayor pro tem and your city council members and ask them to start a conversation or at least deliberate among themselves. Is this something we want to press forward with at a federal level to see if we can change the standards, allow local jurisdictions to have some more say in how these things get approved? I think that's why you have local elected leaders and why we have state and national leaders. And you should, if you're concerned, and I shouldn't say if, your concern is clearly that deep, I would press those buttons. It takes effort, and I know you're all raising young families, having raised 4 of my own, I know how much effort that takes and time, and you have your jobs and bills to pay and all that. So I don't discount it. Unfortunately, we're operating with an old set of standards that are still handcuffing us on these decisions with respect to health and safety. On the visual element of it, I think the new poles are, the impact is de minimis. I mean, it's 3 inches added and maybe a couple inches on the side. And I think after a while, I don't know anybody who walks around looking at the top of light poles anyway. I don't think you'll even notice it. But so I'll be supporting the motion. I would say to Commissioner Zick's comment, which I think was very good, I'm going to ask staff, and this may need to be something that council has to approve, or the city manager's office. I really think that these reports, these post-construction reports, we only have 60 of them, so I think we should post those online so people can see them. I think that's a good idea, and I agree with you. I think they should be able to see that data. So if we have an ability to put those online somewhere, I think that would be terrific. So barring any more comments, I will call for the question on the motion.
That motion carried 5-0.
Thank you. And is this appealable decision to the city council within, this will be final in 7 days unless appealed to the city council? Correct. Thank you. How's everybody doing? That one took long. Does anybody need a break? Okay, we're good to go? Okay, Julie, next item, please.
Public hearing item number 2, planning application 19-04 for a conditional use permit for a 1,497 square foot convenience store with the sale of beer and wine for off-site consumption, type 20 ABC license, and a conditional use permit for concurrent sale of alcohol beverages and motor vehicle fuel located at 2281 Newport Boulevard. This is a call to report any ex parte communications.
Okay, commissioners, any communications to report? Okay, seeing none, Mr. Arias, please.
Thank you, Chair. Planning Commissioners, Justin Arias again, Assistant Planner. As Julie described, this request is for a conditional use permit, including requests for the construction of a new convenience store with the sale of alcohol for off-site consumption and for the concurrent sale of alcohol and motor vehicle fuel. The project site is located on the corner of Newport Boulevard and Fairview Road and is bounded by State Route 55 to the south and to the east. The site is approximately 0.29 acres in size and contains an existing 76 gas station and a cashier's booth. The property is zoned C2 General Business and has a general plan land use designation of General Commercial. Surrounding properties have similar zoning and land use designations, and adjacent uses include a car wash, small retail center, and a flower shop. Here are some site photos of the existing gas station with cashier's booth. The site contains an approximately 200 square foot building containing the cashier's booth with 8 fueling stations underneath an existing canopy. The cashier's booth was approved in 1983 with the fueling stations constructed in 1963. The project proposes to demolish the existing cashier's booth and to construct a new 1,497 square foot convenience store with the fuel stations and canopy proposed to remain. The project also includes upgrades to the parking area, new landscaped areas, and other site improvements. As part of the site improvements, 6 parking spaces are proposed, including 1 handicap accessible parking space. 6 spaces are required by code. The preliminary landscape plan includes 2 species of trees, both proposed as 24-inch box trees, 1 sweet shade tree, and 2 crepe myrtle trees. 6 trees are required by code, 3 trees are existing, and 3 additional trees are proposed. The preliminary landscape plan also includes various shrubs and ground cover throughout the landscaped areas. The design of the new convenience store includes a mixture of colored stucco, both light light gray and gray tones, and includes a building element surrounding the front entrance, which acts as an entry canopy, proposed to be painted orange to match the 76 gas station colors. The floor plan of the proposed convenience store includes a sales floor with cooler area, a unisex bathroom, as well as a backroom area. The floor plan also includes a 278 square foot mezzanine, which is conditioned to be used for storage. Per Title 13, Article 16 of the Municipal Code, any new liquor store, convenience store, or mini market shall be subject to approval of a conditional use permit. The convenience store is proposing to operate 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. In conjunction with the proposed convenience store, the applicant is requesting to allow the retail sale of beer and wine for off-site consumption with a Type 20 off-sale beer and wine ABC license. The California Beverage Control Act establishes the criteria under which alcohol licenses may be issued by ABC. This includes a ratio of retail ABC licenses to population for each census tract, which is commonly referred to as overconcentration or undue concentration. ABC defines undue concentration of off-sale ABC licenses as one of the following. Either the area is located in a crime reporting district that has 20% or greater number of reported crimes than the city average, or the ratio of, of off-sale retail licenses to population within the subject census tract exceeds the ratio of licenses to population of the in the county as a whole. In this case, based on the ratio of ABC licenses to population in the census tract, 3 off-sale licenses are allowed, whereas 5 off-sale retail licenses currently exist. Therefore, there is currently an existing overconcentration of off-sale ABC licenses within this census tract. In addition, there are additional businesses within close proximity located within other census tracts that also have off-sale ABC licenses. In consultation with the police department, staff will support an off-sale retail ABC license for this proposed use as long as the license is transferred from a location existing within the subject census tract. As a result, the number of ABC licenses within this census tract would remain unchanged. Conditions of approval have been included to require the applicant to transfer an ABC license from within the subject census tract. Title 13, Article 3 of the Municipal Code provides processing procedures, development standards, as well as mandatory conditions and discretionary conditions of approval for uses proposing the concurrent sale of alcoholic beverages and motor vehicle fuel. Per this section of the code, staff has included the mandatory conditions of approval for these uses, as well as other applicable requirements and operational conditions of approval. The proposed use is consistent with the general plan, zoning code, and with other applicable development standards, and staff's recommendation includes standard conditions of approval related to uses that sell alcoholic beverages, convenience store developments, and uses proposing concurrent sale of alcohol and motor vehicle fuel. Therefore, staff is recommending that the Planning Commission adopt a resolution to find the project categorically exempt from the provisions of the California Environmental Quality Act and approve Planning Application 19-04, subject to conditions of approval. That concludes my presentation, and I'm available for any questions. The applicant is also here and has a presentation.
Thank you, Mr. Arias. Commissioner Zick has questions.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Yes, sir.
I'm excited anytime I see a property owner wanting to make investment in buildings and upgrade. I am always encouraged when I see that. So I've got a couple questions about this project. First thing, there was an indication that the applicant would seek a license from the state only after they receive approval from the city with the CUP. Is that customary? Customary that an applicant would not already be in possession of a license?
It's not uncommon. I think it can happen either way if I understand the regulations correctly. But in this case, the city would issue the conditional use permit first, and the applicant would apply to the state for their license afterward.
Okay, thank you. And then on page 4, the staff report where it discusses the criteria that ABC uses in evaluating this overconcentration. My question is that criteria discretionary or is it absolute? By that I mean, well, maybe you understand my question.
So is your question that does the city have the ability to approve a conditional use permit even though there is overconcentration?
No, that's a good, that isn't my question, but that would have been a good one too. No, my question is, would the ABC deny a license because the census tract already exceeds the number of licenses based on their established ratio? Or would it be something they would just consider, but they may deviate?
Commissioner Zick, the ABC basically defers to cities to make those decisions, and I think rightfully so. So the answer is no, they would not automatically deny it typically if it's overconcentrated.
Good, thank you. I like that answer. The criteria of the crime reporting district. I didn't see that information in the staff report. Do we know what the crime reporting is in this district relative to the city average?
We don't have crime reporting statistics in that way, and because the criteria is an or statement, we do have the overconcentration data. So that is the criteria that we relied on.
Okay, and then also on handwritten page 4, where staff says that based on this census tract, 3 licenses are allowed, whereas 5 are existing. Kind of wondering how'd that happen? How did number 4 and number 5 get approved if 3 are allowed?
So looking at some of the licenses that have been issued in this census tract, which is available on ABC's website, it does appear that a couple were originally issued in other cities and were then transferred to a location within this census tract.
We wouldn't have to approve that?
It would kind of depend on the specific request. I unfortunately didn't get a chance to dive that deep into the couple that were transferred into this census tract.
Okay, and then I had a specific question, handwritten page 14, that lists the 5 that exist. The 5th one on that list, Big Blossom, shown at 2238 Avalon, that appears to be a residential home. Did I miss something on that one?
That is correct. It is a residential home. The type of licenses that location has, it actually has 3 different types of licenses. It has a Type 9 license, which is for beer and wine importer. It has a Type 17, which is a beer and wine wholesaler, and then also has the Type 20 off-sale beer and wine. Specific to this request, again, this is all from the California ABC website. This specific use does have a couple of operational restrictions, the main of which is that it's an online sales type of location, and so no business is done at that location.
Got it. Okay, thank you for that. On the time of use, on page 3, you indicate, and your staff report included, or presentation included, this applicant proposes to operate 24/7. Separate from the issue of alcohol sales, I don't notice any restriction or prohibition in condition of approval So I'm assuming that you accept the 24/7 operation, correct?
So that would kind of be enveloped into condition of approval number 1, describing that the use, limited to the use as described in the report.
Okay. And then the condition of approval on page 27, let me see which number that was so I can refer to it specifically. Number 11 has a restriction on the alcoholic beverage sales where they are prohibited from 6 a.m. to 10 a.m. in the morning, as well as 12 p.m. midnight to 2 a.m. I don't have a question about that condition. What I do have a question, though, is about the condition of approval number 37, which has a requirement that employees on duty be 21 years or older during the time of 10 p.m. to 2 a.m. in order to sell alcoholic beverages. So if under condition of approval number 11, you can't sell alcohol past midnight, then I'm curious why we have a requirement for 21-year-olds to be on duty from 10 p.m. to 2 a.m. In other words, from midnight to 2 a.m. Why would we have that requirement if they can't sell alcohol from midnight to 2 a.m.?
So the restriction on the additional restriction on sales of alcohol is from past practice. 37, I believe, is one of the standard conditions of approval. Let me do a little research. I believe it's from the concurrent sale of motor vehicle fuel and alcohol section of the code.
Okay, but it's not making sense to me. So are you saying it needs to be reworded, or are you trying to tell me how that makes sense?
We're going to take a quick look at the code section to determine whether that's a mandatory condition of approval listed in the code or discretionary. And if it's discretionary, I think we can change it to match the hours of operation for sales of alcohol. I think that's what the intent was, but because these conditions were hardwired into the code, they appear as they are here.
Got it, thank you. And then my last question on page 14 having to do with the police department, saying that they don't support a new license. However, if there was a transfer from another business within the census tract, they would reconsider their position. My question is, how does staff incorporate the police department position into their recommendation? In other words, it appears that they're indicating that they do not support this, yet there's a staff recommendation that basically advocates an approval. So could you help me with that one?
Yes, so with all development applications, a representative from the police department does get review plans for any proposal.
So we're going to take a quick look at the letter that you're specifically referencing, but it has been the city's practice and a consistent practice by the police department to, when there is a case of overconcentration that is existing, they will ask staff to include a condition of approval that supports the project only if they can secure a transfer of an existing alcohol license. In that way, they're not increasing or contributing to overconcentration, and that has been agreeable to them in the past. They have not supported requests for alcohol licenses or conditional use permits related to alcohol licenses when there's an overconcentration, if it will involve a new license that would contribute to overconcentration in that tract or citywide. So that is the information we received from the police department.
So if I'm understanding you correctly in resolving that with this comment, what they're basically saying is that they recognize that there are 5 off-sale licenses in this overconcentrated area, and they would only support this application if there was a transfer of one of these 5 licenses to this applicant from within the census tract.
That's correct.
All right, thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Commissioners, any questions? Okay, Commissioner Woods. No, please, go ahead.
I just have a quick one. I wanted to go back about the crime incident reporting. So on the City of Costa Mesa Police Department website, you can actually, there's a fun little app that you can click on, and you can look at specific areas and see the number of police calls to that area. Did you guys consult that and see how many police calls we've had? You could only go back 14 days, unfortunately. But I recall looking at this, and I don't have my notes with me, but it was somewhere between 9 and 14 police calls in this area. I think it was 14. I remember thinking once a day, where the police is coming to this area and responding to incident reports. And I believe the reports range from homelessness to domestic disputes to fraud. It was pretty wide-ranging types of crimes. Did you guys look at that specifically for this area so that you could sort of speak to crime reporting?
So we do consult with our police department, and as part of their review, they provide feedback as to whether there is any particular trend in crimes that would affect their recommendation one way or the other. They did not indicate that for this application.
But you didn't specifically look at that app and see how many crimes have been reported in the...
Our planner does take a look at the app, but they rely on the police department for any determinations based on that data.
Got it.
Okay. Quick question. So the application description is for a new 1,497 square foot convenience store at an existing gas station with the sale of beer and wine for off-site consumption in conjunction with state alcoholic beverage control license type 20. So here's my question. So if the condition of approval that a type 20 license must be obtained through a transfer of an existing license within the census, they're not able to pull that off. Does the entire CUP become void? So in other words, is the entire CUP application contingent upon their obtaining the transfer of type 20 license within the census tract?
So in order to use the CUP, they would need to comply with the conditions of approval, and that includes securing a transferred license. So from a practical perspective, it is contingent. The CUP needs to be activated within 2 years, or the entitlement does expire. So those two things together work as a practical restriction.
So let me ask you another question. Absent a request for a type 20 license, would this particular application require a CUP? Just the convenience store?
This section of our code for convenience store, liquor stores, and mini markets do require a conditional use permit regardless if they engage in the sale of alcoholic beverages.
Okay, so the only reason I was asking the question was the word with rather than and in that description kind of is throwing me off a little bit, but we can deal with that later. Commissioners, any other questions of staff? Commissioner Colbert?
Yes, staff, could you please, just for clarification for my purposes, explain the process of a transfer? I don't think that I completely understand what that process entails or how it has taken place in the past of a liquor license.
So the transfer of a license would be an application that would be submitted to the state requesting a transfer of the license from one address, business address, to another. It's not something that the city reviews other than if a conditional use permit is triggered by that transfer.
Thank you.
Okay. Vice Chair Harlan.
Yeah, so a follow-up to that. So there's a possibility that a license could be transferred to this census tract and we would be unaware of it, correct?
The city is consulted anytime that there's either a new or transferred alcohol license, but it's more from the perspective of does it trigger any city requirements? But we are notified by ABC.
Right. So my question is, if ABC approves the transfer of the license and we have no discretion or weighing in of that, the applicant could conceivably go to that new licensee who's located in the census tract and obtain another transfer. And maybe let me put it another way. Is the maximum number of ABC licenses available to this applicant only the 5 that are within the census tract?
Correct, yes, that's our intent, with that condition of approval.
Okay.
Okay, I will open the public hearing and ask the applicant to come forward, please. Good evening, sir.
Good evening, Mr. Chairman.
Have your name and address for the record, please.
Joseph Karaki, Western States Engineering, 4887 East La Palma Avenue,
Thank
Anaheim, California. I want to thank staff for...
Oh, and before you start, I'm sorry, I have to do this. Have you read the conditions of approval and do you agree with them?
Yes, except I have a very minor request after I do a short presentation to this project, if you allow me. Yes, I do concur with all the conditions, but except the issue of the... I have to do some more explanation about the ABC.
That's fine. You can get to it when you're ready to go.
Okay, thank you. My client is here also. The owner of the station is present here.
Well, I might just ask for the record, what condition number are you opposed to? You don't have to tell me what you would want. Instead, just tell me what number so I know.
Okay,
we have it for the
then
record.
you want me, I can start backward into this, which is the...
Okay, is it number 13 related to the
For
transfer?
the alcohol
Okay,
sale,
that's
yeah.
all I wanted on the record. Okay, proceed, sir. Sorry.
Thank you. So my client is here. They've been into this business almost 20 years, and this is family-owned and operated business. They own the gas station also on 19th and the 55, the same owner. And they have an alcohol license there and never had a problem with the neighbors and with the issues of vandalism or theft or crime into that station. So now they're spending, like Commissioner Zick, they're spending over $1.5 million to put a new building and then upgrade all the fueling underground, the tanks, the pipes, so this way they can meet all the new regulation and requirement. If you look at the floor plan, it's only have 1,400 square feet, that including the mezzanine, and I have 7 cooler doors. So within that 7 cooler doors, it's a matter of, to have the beer and wine license is just a matter of convenience, not a matter of making a kill of the sales of beer and wine. So out of the 7 doors, they're going to be using probably 2 doors at the max to have somebody comes in at a certain time and buy beer, maybe. But the bulk of the sale comes from the rest of the store, from the chips and so on. So it's not the beer and wine. It's just an accessory to the convenience store. Being said that, so I would like to request, instead of having to, by the way, it's 4 licenses versus 5 over concentration, because the 5th license, Justin had said, that it is online sales. So it means there is no walking into this house to sell the beer and wine. So they obtained it in 2018, which is most recent, back in February of 2018. We did our research on it. So it's newly granted a beer and wine sales online. So technically, you have 4 licenses, not 5. People walking into the businesses. Second, about the crime, we checked about the crime into that same vicinity. It doesn't appear that there are crimes related to alcohol, like might be homeless, phone calls from the police department, or some domestic abuses or so on. But there's nothing related to alcohol into the same vicinity. So what I'm requesting, if I may, with your permission, Mr. Chairman, is to allow the transfer within the city limit, not from the census, because there is 5 right now, or 4 technically, but I'm sure it's like you're giving us food to eat, but you put in tape on our mouth to be able to bring that license from the census tract versus the city-wide, the city limit. That's the only thing I'm requesting. The rest of the conditions, we concur with all the conditions on that end. So with that, I if you have any question, I would like to answer.
Thank you, sir, very much, and thank you for the clarification on the condition that you would like to see versus the one that's proposed on number 13. Commissioners, any questions of the applicant? Okay, thank you, sir. Please have a seat, and I'll open public comment and ask anyone wishing to speak to this item, please come forward. Yes, ma'am.
So just, I hope you don't own any 76 gas station stock or T-Mobile stock or AT&T stock or Edison stock, because you should definitely be recusing yourself from these items. So remember the 99-cent store? A few of you weren't around, but Mayor Katrina Foley, it was magically passed by Willa, the zoning administrator, once again, here we go. And Mayor Katrina Foley pulled it up because she was concerned, the residents were concerned. Because in that area on Harbor, there were already too many liquor stores, too many liquor licenses. What I find really offensive about this application, and I don't know why the staff isn't catching it, besides the fact that this is a heroin heaven over here, when you've got the convenience stores, now you're going to have another convenience store half a block away. They turn into heroin central, not to mention the liquor. They just do, sorry, and this one's going to have a bathroom. Oh. So anyway, they've neglected to go across the street. People walk. They also drive. There's a liquor store right across the street. It's not even mentioned here. What about Stater Brothers? They have whoa, welcome. They have everything you could possibly want in Stater Brothers. Then you go along, and there's also restaurants with liquor licenses on Newport Boulevard. Why are these not counted in this? I really resent the staff not counting this. It's exactly like the 99-cent store. They didn't go across the street on that one, right? Remember? Some of you were here. So why aren't they counting these other liquor licenses? Right in this, plus let's not forget, this is coming right off the 55. This just sounds like a recipe for disaster once again. I resent the zoning people that do not count all the liquor licenses properly, just like the sober living things. They don't count the actual houses. They're not counting the restaurants that have liquor licenses. You do it. Do it yourself tonight on the way home.
Thank you. Anyone else wish to speak on this item? Yes, ma'am. And sir.
Hi. My name is Alexandra Benson. This is
Eddie Bellot.
Eddie Bellot with Bellot LLC, 2205 Fairview Road, Costa Mesa. Several concerns. One, the traffic flow. You have the convergence of Old Newport Boulevard, the 55 freeway, and Fairview Road. And it is extremely congested. Has the city done any studies with regards to how this is going to impact an already congested intersection? And the second thing is, well, you've already addressed it, the oversaturation of liquor stores. But with the saturation of the liquor stores, especially since the riverbeds, they've kicked the homeless off the riverbeds.
I'm sorry, continue.
They've kicked the homeless off the riverbeds. We are inundated with homeless. And they know that if it's private property that they can camp out. So there's several office buildings in that area, and they will link themselves up to the fences on the weekends and build tents. And also the post office used to be wide open. Now they actually have a chain lock on it because of the homeless. And it's illegal to serve anybody who's obviously intoxicated. So what they will do with the over-concentration of stores, if they don't succeed in one location, they will go to another location and maybe find somebody who is not as savvy or a younger cashier that will serve them the alcohol. And it contributes to the drug use, the crime, the stealing, and the littering. So, and like I said, also, has anybody done any studies with the traffic? Because it's really bad at that intersection, especially during rush hour. I will avoid it and go down Fairview versus taking the 55, which is more convenient.
And he say he have only 7 doors of beer. Where he's gonna put the sodas and other stuff? It's not enough room for him to put all the stuff.
Okay. Thank you very much for your comments.
Thank you.
Anyone else? Okay, I'll ask the applicant to come back up if he wishes to make any final comments.
In the past, Mr. Chairman, in order for us to be flexible about the request for the beer and wine license, we are willing to put locks on the doors, automatic locks, and close the sales between 10 p.m. to 8 a.m. in the morning. So we don't need to do this, but it's a matter of just an accessory to make it convenient. If somebody comes to the gas station and he doesn't have the say to buy the 6-pack of beers, we're not willing even to sell singles. We can eliminate the selling of singles because we do this application all over the jurisdictions and we know the rules. So in order for us to avoid having problems, whether the homeless or so, we are intending not to sell singles, and we will shut the doors between 10 p.m. to 8 a.m. in the morning with locks on them, if this will alleviate this issue. And so this is one. Two, I would like again to repeat my request respectfully to go citywide versus census tract wide in order to transfer a license.
Okay, thank you, sir, very much.
Thank you.
Commissioners, are there any more questions of staff on this particular item before I close the public
Mr.
hearing?
Chairman?
Commissioner Zick.
Got a couple of questions. On the subject of traffic flow, is this ingress and egress to this property remaining the same in the remodel compared to the existing?
Mr. Chairman, Commissioners, the location of the new drive approaches have been changed slightly for the safe turning movements of vehicles entering and leaving this facility.
So would it be your judgment that the traffic flow is being improved by the proposed changes?
Yes, the ingress and egress provides safe turning movements in and out of the site.
Okay, thank you for that. And then I had a question on the number of existing liquor licenses. So the indication, and I'm referring to staff handwritten page 14, so this was in the staff report available to everyone. You identified the 5 liquor licenses within the census tract. You also, by inclusion of this attachment, reference 6 additional liquor licenses in adjacent census tracts. So from the standpoint of counting other licenses, are there any other liquor licenses within the census tract other than the 5 identified on this page 14?
Yes. For the purposes of overconcentration, the way ABC looks at it, you look at the different types of licenses. So off-sale licenses would all be grouped together and on-sale licenses would be grouped together. So what's not captured on this map would be all the on-sale licenses, which would be your restaurants and bars.
Oh, that's not a subtle point, okay. But I appreciate the clarification. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Commissioner Woods.
Are the number of pumps being increased on site, or does that remain the same?
That's remaining the same.
Okay, and then does California have any restrictions on alcohol sales from 10 p.m. to 8 a.m.?
So staff has conditions of approval that limit the
Yes.
hours of operation, and those hours of operation in some respects, as in condition 47, are mandatory conditions. So there are limitations that the city has set, but as far as I know, there's no state limitations on hours of operation other than what the city provides.
Okay, so what are the city limitations on alcohol sales from 10 p.m. to 8 a.m.?
We're going to find our 2 conditions of approval that both reference hours of operation.
Okay.
Give us
okay.
1 sec.
That's it.
While they're looking that up, sir, can I have you come back up to the podium again? Because Vice Chair Harlan has a question for you.
Sorry, I forgot to ask my one question. It's clearly identified that there are 5 licenses within the census tract which you're aware of. I'm curious if you have approached any of these license holders about acquiring or transferring their license.
Well, you have a liquor store that's been there forever. You have a 7-Eleven. Those are the direct, and they're not gonna give up their licenses. The only option or chances, maybe if Kmart closes their doors, which is not gonna happen either. And then you have the online license. So technically we have 4. Among them there is Kmart. So Kmart is a big store, and I don't know if they're gonna go away or not. But then the liquor store and then the 7-Eleven. So there is no chance for us to have a license.
I see one other Chevron station on Harbor.
That's our competitor, so.
Okay, I just wanted to ask.
Yes, but I mean, I've been doing this for 25 years. Typically, the most jurisdiction put citywide or countywide to transfer. We rarely haven't seen the census tract because nobody wants to give up his license for, especially if you approach Chevron because I'm his competitor or my client is, they're not gonna say, okay, I'm gonna give it to you. But again, only we're gonna sell we're gonna use 2 doors, and this is very limited. This is not something. In the past, another city that put the sales do not exceed 20% of your general sales. I can accept this condition as well. So I'm putting conditions on me to allow me to just be a good neighbor and have a fair competition with the Chevron across the street. That's all I'm asking for, just a convenience for people who come to the gas station. They don't have to stop by the gas station and drove another location and create more traffic to go to the liquor store. Thank you.
Sir, let me ask you just one quick question. If the condition is proposed by staff remained, and you were unable to secure a Type 20 license from another license holder within the census tract, would you still build the convenience store?
That's a very good question because we need to look into the financials because we depend on the traffic to generate business from the convenience store. We're spending, again, over the overall investment is like $1.5 million. I'm not saying that the store depends on the beer and wine, but it's a matter of convenience to bring them in and buy gas and other food plus the beer and wine, but it's not something. I know I've heard your question earlier if that condition will help the overall general conditional use permit. It should not, because if I don't comply with a condition, one of the conditions, especially the beer and wine, I still have probably the right to continue with the project regardless. I'm asking a question.
Well, and I will check on that because that's one of my. So I'm reading in your letter to the city that the beer and wine sales are expected to account for only a small percentage, 1% of your sales.
I'm sorry.
I'm just reading your letter.
Yes.
Okay, so 10% of walk-in cooler displays. So you're saying roughly 1% of your total sales from the convenience store will be beer and wine? Sales.
Maybe there was an error on the 1%. Maybe we meant to be 10% versus.
Okay, so 10%.
Yes, 10%.
Okay, I'm just trying to understand if you didn't have an ability, if you lost that 10% sales because you couldn't get your Type 20 license, would that make your convenience store uneconomical?
It will make it unfair competition with the gas station across.
Well, that's nice, but it wasn't my question. Okay, thank you, sir, very much.
Chair, if I may.
Yes, ma'am.
To answer the question regarding hours of operation. Condition of approval number 11 talks about alcohol beverage sales and hours of operation. This is something that the hours of operation specified in this condition are discretionary. So, for example, right now it reads that alcoholic beverage sales are prohibited between 6 a.m. and 10 a.m., as well as 12 p.m., midnight to 2 a.m. If the commission wished, they could change those hours of operation to, for example, match the hours that are in condition 37. So that's the way that those two things would be rectified. Condition of approval 37 references when employees over the age of 21 need to be in place. And that is a mandatory condition of approval that is specified that way in the code, so we don't have the ability to change that.
Okay. So I have one other question. I'm going to try to put this as clear as I can. If the gentleman is not able to secure a Type 20 license from within the census tract, is he still able to build his convenience store?
Yes, so there are two components of the conditional use permit request. The first one is a conditional use permit is required anytime a convenience store is requested, and the second one is related to the provision of alcohol.
All right. So I appreciate that.
Yes, so the commission could approve the convenience store but deny the alcohol, for example.
So just for my own, because I'm kind of a word guy, to me, the description should read 1,497 square foot convenience store at an existing gas station and the sale of beer and wine of offsite consumption versus with, because it sounds like they're linked somehow. So anyway, that's just, I'm splitting hairs and I really don't need to. Okay, I will close the public hearing unless there's any more questions.
I just had one more clarification.
Okay, won't close it then.
To the question as to whether there were any state regulations on times at which you could sell alcohol, ABC prohibits the sales of alcohol between 2 a.m. and 6 a.m.
Okay, very good.
Thank you.
Thank you. Now I'll close the public hearing and bring the matter up to the dais for commissioner comments or a motion. Commissioner Woods.
No, sorry.
Oh, okay. Okay. You're not going to rescind your grunt like Vice Chair Harlan?
All right. Sorry.
Is Vice Chair Harlan, you're going to take a crack at this?
I'll jump in, yes. So I'm going to make a motion that we approve the project with some modification to the conditions. So I'll just read that we find the project is categorically exempt from provisions of CEQA under guidelines 15303 class 3 for new construction and approved planning application 1904 subject to conditions of approval. And going to those, just as a matter of cleanup, condition number 11 I think should read that we're restricting sales between 10 p.m. and 6 a.m. I think that covers the full period of time. And I believe the applicant also had offered a restriction of no single sales alcoholic beverages. Is that 16? Okay. All right. Don't need to repeat myself. And just as a matter of explanation, I would agree with Commissioner Zick anytime a property owner is looking to reinvest in their property is a good thing, and we should be encouraging it, but obviously we have to be mindful of what the potential impacts are on the community and the neighborhood. I do think a convenience store could be an added benefit here. I do not, however, think that we need to necessarily make it convenient for the applicant to secure the alcohol license. I think that's a fair condition that we have here, that it remains consistent with the census tract. And I do want to make sure I point out, and I think Commissioner Zick's comment was clear on this too, that the staff did take into consideration the full context of this application. So even though we are limited to evaluating the license within the census tract, it is very clear that the larger area, especially across the street at Newport Boulevard, does have other establishments that sell beer and wine. So that is my motion.
Okay, and I will second that with some follow-up comments. In these instances of granting or basically making a determination that a license is warranted because the ABC actually grants the license, I'm always going to defer to the police department's wishes, always. And their wish is no more new type 20s in this census tract, and I am going to abide by their wish. And so I agree that the condition 13 needs to remain as proposed by staff. So I will support the motion. Commissioners, any other comments? Commissioner Zick.
Yeah, I wanted to respond just to a couple of comments that I heard and just sort of give feedback to them rather than let them hang. I'm not insensitive to the concerns and maybe reality, but at minimum concerns, that this sort of establishment could become an attractant for, as was commented, drug users. That said, I doubt seriously that this applicant is intending to have their project be an attractant. And I suspect they would do everything within their power to prevent that from being the case. Second thing is, I think that any criticisms are valid and welcome because we're not perfect and we can't see everything. And when there is a problem, I appreciate it being brought up because it may be something actionable. But when we have people criticized by name that aren't even part of this particular application, that concerns me a little because they're not here to defend themselves. It's not my job to defend them, but it's unfair to criticize them personally. And so I didn't want to just let that go. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Okay, any further comments? Commissioner Woods.
Yeah, I think I'm going to vote differently than the direction I see my fellow commissioners going, and I wanted to explain myself. So there's some pros to this application. I understand that it improves the property and it adds some much-needed landscaping, and it'll provide some regular customer service by placing an employee on site. They're often absent. The place often has a lot of trash there, and it's not very friendly. So I appreciate that you're trying to improve it. What I take issue with is being complacent with the number of liquor licenses in the census tract. There's 5. I don't want any more. I don't want 6. I don't want 4. I don't want 3. 2 would be fine with me. 3, I think, is what the state would allow, so, I'd be okay with that. This area, this is my neck of the woods. I just live on the other side of Wilson, and there's a liquor store at Wilson and Fairview. There's Albertsons at Wilson and Harbor. There's Rite Aid. They all sell liquor, and they have expansive liquor selections. And then we know that there's 5 in that census tract, and there's many more on the other side of Newport Boulevard. We really don't need any more. And I understand that, there's a status quo, that there's 5 there. Why, what's the point of just, what harm is there in just transferring 1 liquor license within the same census tract to allow this business to have that kind of offering? And I don't support that. We're overburdened by homelessness in this area. You see people regularly passed out with empty liquor bottles in front of the businesses, in front of the post office, near the dollar store, over on Harbor and Wilson. It's all over the place at Wilson Park. And I prefer to take a much more conservative approach, so I will not be supporting the motion. Sorry.
Commissioner Woods, thank you for your comments. Any others? Commissioner Colbert.
There's been a lot of language, and I just want to ensure that I am understanding what's taking place. This is an issue that I'm extremely sensitive to, and giving that before I make support the motion or don't support the motion, I want to understand what the motion is. So can we restate the motion and the change in conditions before moving forward?
So certainly, Commissioner Colbert. So the motion is to approve the planning application 19-07, subject to conditions of approval which have been modified per Vice Chair Harlan's recommendations, and that is to change the hours of sales to prohibition from 10 p.m. to 8 a.m. And was there another one, Commissioner? Okay. So that was the only change, and then that it's exempt from CEQA. And so essentially, he's able to build his convenience store. If he's going to have a license, he has to get it from another license holder within the census tract. We're not creating any new licenses.
Mr. Chairman.
Commissioner Zick.
If you would allow me, I thought it was 10 p.m. to 6 a.m., which lined up with the existing
You're
prohibition
correct.
of 6
You're
a.m.
correct. You're absolutely correct. Thank
Okay.
you for the correction.
Okay.
Any other comments? Does that help you? Yeah. Okay, great. Call for the question.
That motion carries 4-1 with Commissioner Navarro Woods voting no.
Okay, thank you, and that will become final in 7 days unless appealed to the City Council. You let me know. Okay, Julie, next item, please.
Public hearing item number 3. Planning application 19-07 is a request for a conditional use permit to establish a luxury auto storage facility with individual private leasable storage units and a clubhouse within an existing industrial building at 3080 Airway Avenue. This is a call to report any ex parte communications.
Thank you, Julie. Commissioners, any communications to report? Okay, seeing none. John, you're on.
Good evening, Chair and Planning Commissioners.
Good
tonight.
evening.
I'm Willie. I'm an assistant planner for the city. Tonight we have a proposal for a luxury car storage located near John Wayne Airport. It will contain 32 storage units with mezzanine and a 2-story clubhouse. The existing property has a single-story building, 78,000 square feet on a 174,000 square feet lot. The proposal will be a 91,000 square feet building with mezzanine. There will be no expansion of the actual building itself. The property is surrounded by a similar industrial zone, and as well as mixed industrial and office uses. There are similar car uses within the actual vicinity, such as Eurocar. We have the Ferrari and Maserati of Newport Beach. We also have Tesla, so this proposal will actually be of a similar use. However, this will be the very first luxury car storage that we have in the city. So taking you to the actual specific site, this photo shows the front of the building taken from Airway Avenue. This photo shows the abutting neighbors. To the north, we have a 2-story industrial and office complex. To the south, we have the headquarters for Rip Curl. Right across the street, we see more mixture of industrial and office uses. Right across from it, we have the Rock Harbor Church. As you enter the actual site, you will see this image here, and this particular area will actually be where the clubhouse will be located. As we go further down the site, this is taken from the rear of the property. Again, it's abutting the actual runway of John Wayne Airport, and those roll-up doors that you see there will actually be utilized. So now taking you into the existing site, as you enter the actual building, you will find yourself in a space where it's an actual 2-story. The upstairs is considered a mezzanine. That will be actually, half of it will be utilized by the proposed use. As you walk further down the actual building, you will find yourself in a space that is a 1-story tilted building. At this point, it's vacant. The lower image, you can see clearly that there is an existing mezzanine. In regards to the existing use, there have been a mixture, but the majority have been automotive uses, as well as a church. It used to be Rock Harbor. They move across the street. As mentioned earlier, there is an existing mezzanine that will be utilized for the second-story clubhouse. So deconstructing the actual proposal, we have the storage unit, which will be approximately 84,000 square feet that I've included the actual drive aisle. That will be towards the rear of the actual building. Towards the front of the building, you would find the actual clubhouse. These storage units will be accessed either by the exterior. Approximately 11 storage units would be accessed from the outside. The rest, 21 units, will be accessed from a shared interior drive aisle. This is a rendering of how the drive aisle will look, and as you can see, there are roll-up doors for individual storage units. Each storage unit will vary in size, approximately 700 to 4,000 square feet. The 4,000 square feet sounds like an outlier, but that will actually be the largest unit that will be located towards the front of the actual building. And the added mezzanine within each car storage will range from 250 to 1,200 square feet. Again, 1,200 square feet will be for the largest unit located towards the front. The intended use for the actual storage on the first floor will be to store and showcase the cars. The mezzanine will be used as a personal space. As a preventative measure, staff included conditions of approval that no storage unit would have a kitchen or a toilet with a combination of bathtub or shower, as well as a storage unit will not be used to conduct professional business and/or services. I'm taking you into the actual clubhouse. The image to your left is the existing clubhouse that the applicant has in their Westlake Village location. The first floor of the actual clubhouse will be the shared common space, such as offices as well as the conference room. The second story, which is the mezzanine, will be the shared space for a lounging area, a bar, as well as pool tables and just your general amenities. Again, the intended use for this clubhouse will be conference and office rooms. There will be private social space for gathering. Again, as a precaution, no space within the building will be rented out to the general public. This as a rentable event space. This will strictly stay a private space, as well as we have limited the private gathering in the clubhouse. In regards to parking, staff use one parking space per car storage. And for the actual clubhouse, we have used one space per, I believe, 12. That gives us a required parking of 119. The proposed parking is 197, and in this case, we have a surplus of approximately 78 parking spaces. In regards to the floor area ratio, this is a very low traffic generating use. The allowable FAR for this property is 0.75. Yes, they will be increasing the square footage, but they will not be close to 0.75. Their proposal is at 0.52. As proposed and conditioned, the proposal will support the city's existing auto industry. It will actually attract similar luxury industry, industrial uses within this prime industrial district, it will be compatible with the actual mix of permitted uses within this area. We've also added conditions of approval as a preventative measure as discussed earlier. Staff is recommending a modified conditions of approval number 6. You have received that in one of our administrative meeting, which shall read any on-site events, excluding those events described in condition of approval number 7, should be limited to 4 times a year with a maximum attendance of 200 people. Such events may be subject to issuance of special event permit by the city per code section 9205 through 9208. Again, no space within the building will be rented out to the general public as a rentable space. The project is exempt from CEQA. Staff is recommending to adopt a resolution to approve PA 1907, subject to the conditions of approval. That concludes my presentation. If you guys have any questions, we are here to answer them.
Thank you very much for your report. Commissioners, any questions of staff on this item? Commissioner Zick.
Thank
and
you,
then
Mr.
Commissioner Woods.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Could you help me find where in the conditions of approval is a reference to the item you mentioned about restricting the use of the office area to non-business? Those aren't the exact words you used, but I was struggling to find that one.
It is found under condition number 4.
Got it. Thank you very much for that. Second, and it's more a question of curiosity, is there a limit to so these vehicles are obviously going to be stored in many cases, I would assume, potentially even long-term. Is there a limitation to how much fuel can be in the fuel tank of these vehicles, or is there no limit on that?
There is not a limitation from staff's perspective. Perhaps the applicant could answer the question as to their intentions.
Okay. And then, so probably same vein. In terms of the fire protection for the building, I'm assuming it would have to be brought up to code as opposed to some acceptance of an existing non-conforming condition, since the use is significantly different than it was built?
That's correct.
Okay. Then a question about the car wash. So there's a condition of approval also on this, and there's a reference to a car wash vendor, and I'm specifically concerned about the discharge water. So my question, though, is if there is an opportunity for the owners to wash their own vehicles, is there still the same requirement that the discharge water is prevented from entering the municipal water system? Or is there a prohibition against the individual owners from washing their own vehicles? And I'm kind of looking at condition of approval number 5, handwritten, page 53.
So, Mr. Chairman, sorry about that.
Yes.
And commissioners, so that restriction will not apply to an individual resident. It applies to car wash operators.
So an individual could wash their car and the discharge would go down the sewer system?
There's, as far as I know, there's no restriction on the private property owner to, this is, I'm speaking regarding a resident of the city can wash their cars, and even though we may educate them on how to properly wash their cars so they are not contributing to the water, it is for private operators. And give me just a moment. So for commercial applications, we do require that water that's generated from car wash operation does not enter the storm drain system, that that water be treated.
Regardless of who's doing the car washing?
Correct.
Thank you for that. And then my last question has to do with this issue of the restrooms and the restriction or condition of approval that goes along with that. And this is the condition of approval number 3 on handwritten page 53. And so here's where I'm a little confused about that. Part of this might be a question for the applicant, but on handwritten page 21, in the applicant's documentation of the facility, in the third paragraph, they indicate that there will be plumbing and sewer for future restrooms. And that kind of caught my attention, especially because you've got the condition of approval that essentially says you can't have a kitchen or a toilet in combination with a bathtub or shower. So I'm kind of confused by all of that. So, so let me just kind of break some of the language down. When you say kitchen, if they had a microwave, does that make it a kitchen?
There's a definition of kitchen in the code. A microwave would not be considered a kitchen. It's more permanent cooking facilities.
Got it. So there's sufficient definition that you could point to if there was a question or an issue that came up about this?
Correct.
Okay. And where you can't have a toilet in combination with a bathtub or shower. So I'm trying to envision this. So conceivably, they could build a bathtub and shower, but then they'd be prohibited from having a toilet also? Or they could build the toilet, but then they'd be prohibited from having a bathtub or shower also?
Correct. It's what you mentioned. It would just be a toilet without a shower or a bathtub. And that is just for preventative measures.
Okay, now, I'm sure these aren't the kind of people that would think about these clever things like me, but what if one guy builds a shower and the other guy builds a bathtub, or toilet, I mean. So we're not worried about prohibiting showers and bathtubs. We just don't want them to have a shower, bathtub, and a toilet. Is that the intent?
Yes, that's the intent. The intent is not to have any particular unit with a combination of a toilet and a shower. And the idea here is to ensure that for any future lessees, that they understand that the units are not to be used for residential purposes of any sort.
Okay, but they can have a toilet and sink, though, correct?
They can have a toilet and sink, yes.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Commissioner Woods?
Yeah, I just needed a little bit of clarification. So is it 31 units or 32 units? I've seen both in the staff report and the letter submitted by the applicant.
They are proposing 32.
32 units plus the clubhouse.
Correct. And in the applicant's letter, in our conversation, some of the units may be combined, so you may have lesser units.
Okay, right, depending on the leasee. So would each unit come with a wet bar, or is the wet bar only in the clubhouse?
It's our understanding that the applicant intends to provide plumbing that would allow for wet bars within the individual storage units, but perhaps they can elaborate on their intent.
Okay. Are there any restrictions to serving alcohol or consuming alcohol on site, whether it be hours of operation or serving, in the late hours, say, after 2 a.m.? Is there any such type restrictions on alcohol use or alcohol consumption on site?
So the conditional use permit doesn't include a request for serving alcohol in general. So if, for example, in the clubhouse there was an event and it was a catered event, then an alcohol license would come with the caterer. But it's
Okay.
our intent that there's no permitting of alcohol specifically for this facility.
So then why is there wine lockers and wet bars?
So in each storage unit, I think the intention is for that to be for personal consumption. I'm talking about for events or commercial consumption. A person can store wine in their own personal storage unit.
They can store wine, but they won't be able to consume it on site without a special event permit. Is that right? I'm confused.
So
It
since
just
it's
seems
their-
that I'm really having difficulty wrapping my head around cars and bars, and 31 of them, 32.
So in a personal storage unit, if you stored wine in your personal storage unit and you opened a bottle and you had a glass, that's not anything that's prohibited. However, what is prohibited is sort of the commercial serving of wine in an event or a clubhouse environment. So
Okay.
that's the distinction that we're making.
And so personal use would be just the person that's leasing the space, or would personal use be expanded to include the personal guests of the leasee?
It would be personal use and personal guests, just like in your home, for example.
Okay. Is there any other, can you think of any other businesses in this zoning designation, in this area, that has the same kind of use? Where there's a wet bar that's allowed for, that's, they can have personal consumption of?
No, it's a unique combination of uses. It's one of the reasons that it's a conditional use permit instead of just straight car storage.
Okay, and then my last question had to do with condition number 7. And it says that private gatherings in the clubhouse are limited to 1 gathering per week with no more than 30 attendees, and 1 gathering per weekend with no more than 60 attendees. So that just seems limiting, right? If let's say they were to lease out all 32 units and you have 32 leasees and only one of them can use the clubhouse 1 day of the week, and perhaps another one can use it on the weekend. Is that right? Or does that refer to each leasee? Like each unit can only use the clubhouse once a week and can only have 1 gathering per weekend? Does that condition refer to each discrete unit, or is it the collective whole?
Does not refer to each discrete unit, it's the collective whole. The condition is meant to address the use of the clubhouse and to limit it so that it essentially doesn't turn into a quasi-event center.
Right.
The specific limitations that you see in that condition are actually pulled from the applicant's letter, so it's what they were comfortable with proposing.
Okay. And so if they were to have more than 60 attendees, then at that point, that would trigger a special use permit.
It may not be a special event permit per
Special
se,
event.
but it would be an event that falls under condition of approval number 6. As a larger event, it's limited in frequency.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. Vice Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm going to have operational questions for the applicant, but I did want to clarify one thing, and I don't think our language is correct here. So my understanding is this is ownership with the condo map and CCNRs. So references and conditions of approval to leasing an auto storage unit or lessees doesn't seem to be accurate. And that also leads me to a question about, I guess, condition number 10. Future proposal to convert the non-residential lease complex to a non-residential common interest development. Isn't this a common interest development?
It is not. This proposal is for lease only. If the applicant wanted to come back and subdivide the property into individually owned storage units, they would need a tract map for condominium purposes to come back before this body.
Okay, I thought I read somewhere that there was a condo map attached to this, but.
There is not a condo map. I did see some references in the applicant's letter to condominiums, but I think that that might have been a leftover from a prior idea.
Okay. So then I guess a later question for the applicant will be whether or not you can assign your storage unit as a lease to another entity. So hold on to that.
All right. I just have something I want to point out, and then we'll open the public hearing. Condition of approval number 5. Car wash operators are required to contain the car washing water to prevent any discharge water into the municipal wastewater system or towards any landscaping areas. Then on handwritten page 56, under engineering condition of approval number 28, the applicant shall submit plans to show the location of the car wash and method of discharging water, and it provides them basically 3 options for discharging water. 1, closed loop system. 2, discharge into municipal water system, which we just told them they can't do in condition number 5, and also discharge towards landscaping, which we also told them they can't do in 5. Can we strike those 2? Without, I just think that we're telling them in one condition they can't do it, and engineering is telling them in another condition that you have 3 options. Sounds like we only have 1. Under condition 5.
Mr. Chairman and Commissioners, you may strike those 2 conditions.
All right. Thank you very much. I will open the public hearing and ask the applicant to come forward, please. Evening, sir.
Good evening, Chair.
Have you read the conditions of approval and in specific the alternative condition number 6 relative to maximum attendance of 200 people and so on and so forth?
I have.
Okay, and do you agree to them?
I have.
Okay, thank you, sir.
Yes, thank you.
Floor is yours.
Tony Principe, West Cord, 951 South Westlake Boulevard, Westlake Village. I'm excited to be here tonight and finally be bringing a potentially finish line here to Orange County. I was a resident here many years ago and been wanting to get back here and do this, so we're excited about the project. Finish line auto storage, and you see an image of the Westlake facility, the first phase of it, is a collector car storage facility that offers very private and exclusive and secure storage for car collectors that are really beyond 1 or 2 cars and is really looking to be in a, for lack of a better term, a country club atmosphere with other collectors. There's a synergy amongst the collectors. They're very concerned about the security, access, and ingress and egress, who sees these collections, what the security's like. We have card key access with gates, cameras, 24-hour surveillance, and then each individual unit that ultimately will be owned, I'll answer that question in a moment, will have its own security within that, as well as cameras around the complex. This project in Westlake Village was a 2-part project, so we converted an existing building like the subject property, and then ultimately with the excess land, built out the second phase that you see here. There was 28 units plus some office space in addition to that at this subject site. And the units range from about 1,200 square feet up to about 5,500 square feet at that property. Now, the intent here is to do condominiums, but because we're going to be submitting our condo map that takes longer to get that process going, we designed this as individual units that ultimately will be owned by the collectors. And so we put in place very strict CC&Rs, which staff has a copy of the Westlake facility, that really limits and restricts what can be done in these units, including restricting residential and sleeping in them and operating traditional businesses out of these. They're intended for car collectors to store and curate really their own collections and decorate their spaces as they choose to kind of complement their collections. The facility in Westlake, when completes, a little over 80,000 square feet. And believe it or not, on a typical day like you see here in this picture, you can shoot a cannon through the parking lot because there's just typically, you know, the owners may visit these spaces once or twice a week at best. And so with 30, you know, 2 units, and depending on how we chop them up, the square footage might not change, but it could go from 32. Many of the owners bought multiple units there. I think in that we had about 20 owners and 30 units, roughly 29 units that are there. So what typically happens and why the clubhouse and some of these amenities are there, such as this facility here, is we house coffee machines and sodas and snacks and drinks, storage lockers. And so owners will typically go and put their cars and collectibles in their spaces. You'll see some images of what those look like. And then they may go on drives and things, so they'll meet here in the morning, maybe with a couple of their buddies that are either owners there or friends. They'll grab a cup of coffee, sit and talk. Maybe they go for a drive. And then come back and maintain their collections there. It's really a place where collectors and owners can spend some time together. What you'll find is throughout Orange County and other markets, you either have, and Orange County is a good example, you're limited in garage space, especially the beach communities, and you've got issues with humidity and the moisture of the ocean. And so the next step is them renting spaces within business parks, and you're next to contractors and gyms and other uses, and people are seeing exotic and classic cars rolling in and out of spaces and looking inside and seeing what's in there. So these people typically want to be with other car enthusiasts, so they don't worry about necessarily the security aspects, but also the synergy. It's become kind of a place for car enthusiasts to spend time. So the subject property, and I'll take you through some of the units to answer your questions about plumbing. So what we've done is, and this has evolved over the years out of, obviously an extravagant luxury for certain people, but it's a necessity in that when people are accumulating collections that are greater than 2 or 3 cars, they want a place to put them. This is kind of the solution for that. What we've found is that we provided common area bathrooms and facilities for some of these owners. If somebody buys a 1,000-foot or 1,500-foot space, they may not want to create a lounge area, whatever, within their space. They may, but that's why the clubhouse comes in, so they can put their cars and store, and then they go hang out, watch the Super Bowl or sports programs and stuff, and kind of spend a little time in there. So typically those 30 owners are going to be using the space, not at the same time. You might have 2 or 3 that go in the morning, grab a cup of coffee, go down to their place, whatever, use the restrooms. But what we found is that we plumbed, and we have this facility plumbed, and sewer lines and water lines to every unit in case they want to put a bathroom in their space, or they want to put a wash sink, wash their hands after they play around with their car or wipe their car down. They might put a coffee machine, that type of thing, but it's not intended as a place for them to live, to reside. But with the mezzanines that are upstairs there, they may create their own little lounge and seating area. You can go back here, you can get an example on that last one with the cars. I mean, people decorate these things. They collect these vehicles, and then they collect the memorabilia, old Porsche signs, whatever it is that kind of complement these. These become mini museum spaces, for lack of a better term, and kind of like the William Lyons Museum that's next door. That was a collection of one particular collector that grew. He happened to collect cars and airplanes, and it wound up right there. But he's also got 70-plus cars at his home and a garage in Orange County as well. So these are the in-between collectors that are going from renting a space someplace to buying a space here and creating the synergy to maybe the next step of the William Lyons and Marconis that have the bigger collections where they have much larger facilities. Part of what makes this facility fun, too, is some of the events that we curate, which is why the clubhouse was important. We invite the auction community, some of the collector car auctions that you see on TV and around. These are obviously the demographic and people that are collecting some of these vehicles. And so we'll have the auction people come and talk and do a seminar to the owners there on that, or detailing a vehicle, or the collector insurance, or different trends that are going on. And so all those things take place here, and it really has just become a place of synergy where gearheads are going to go, maybe like a yacht club is for people that have boats. And so it's quite fun. It's nice because everything's automated there. So from somebody's cell phone, they can open the gate, to the facility. They can open their roll-up door, they can turn off the light, or turn on the lights and watch them through their security, turn off the alarms, and then close everything up when they're done. So if somebody's going to come by and deliver a car, or pick up a car, do that type of thing. So it's a unique environment that Orange County doesn't have. We've had a lot of strong interest from collectors from, believe it or not, LA all the way down to this area, because many people own homes in the area and come down here on the weekends. And so this is really a viable option for them, because they can't store a car on Balboa Island or whatever it is. So here they can come down, have their home, and have a place to come and spend time with friends. From our past experience with the Westlake facility, we have collectors that have as many as 200 and 300 cars in collections, but have bought units here because all their friends are there. This is the place they want to be. So it's really, that's kind of the emphasis on it. The events that we, I think there was 4 events that were limited to up to 200 people. This site has a tremendous amount of parking on site. And so there may be 3 or 4 times a year where we host a different car event. It's all invite only, and it's all on the benefit of these owners. It's not open to the general public. We don't want that type of thing here, so it's really invite only. So if Porsche wants to unveil a car at this particular facility for the owners that are here, they would come and do that, and we invite the Porsche community on an invite-only list, and that would be one of those larger facilities or larger events during that period of time. Just as a clarification, too, there is an interior driveway. So even though it looks like we're increasing the square footage of the building, we're really not. What we've done is, because of the design of the building, we can't drive around and punch doors all the way around it, so we've created a driveway down the middle of it. So we have a 300-foot wide by 40-foot wide interior driveway that will have a 300-foot skylight down the middle. I think there was an image that was up there. If you go right there, this is kind of standing in the middle of the driveway there, but we'll have a 300-foot skylight. So this is really a covered driveway. It's not intended as usable space, but it's the only way to get ingress and egress out of the building. So we're really not increasing the rentable square footage of the building at all. What we lost in the driveway, we put back in mezzanines in each of the spaces. So each space we will deliver a clean shell with polished concrete, white walls, a mezzanine, a small mezzanine in each space, and plumbing, sewer, separate electricity meters. So each owner would get his own utility bill, or their own utility bill, I should say. So they're all kind of freestanding that way. They can sell them, but they're restricted to the CC&Rs that will be in place. And right now, there'll be the conditions that we'll have in place until we do the condominium plan. But we're intending on immediately pursuing the condo map right after this, but we'll be submitting our plans for construction so we can start that process simultaneously, which is what we've done on many other projects like this. So I think I covered everything, but if you have questions, I'm happy to talk to you about it and go through it.
Thank you, sir. Commissioners, any questions of the applicant? I think you're good for right now. The vice chair has one.
I said I had one before. I guess I have to ask
I
it.
wasn't listening.
Sure.
I'm sorry.
So do the unit owners or lessees, however we're calling them, do they get a membership to the club? Is there an organizational entity that runs the clubhouse?
No, there's, like any condominium project, there's an association. The owners will create a board and run that. We will manage the facility, coordinating the events as kind of the third-party management. I'll have a space in there myself as well, so we'll be on site. But there's no membership or charge to use that. It's all built in, if you will, baked into the common areas and the charges for them. So the clubhouse is intended to be available for the owner's use at no additional charge, and kind of baked into the common area charges every month are the provisions for the sodas and coffees and snacks and all the things that would be the provisions to run that particular space.
I'm going to refrain from having a very bad pun here. Is there any restriction in the CC&Rs with regards to heavy repair work of the automobiles?
Our CC&Rs do. I mean, the zoning there allows, obviously, there's automotive uses all around us, body shops and stuff, but we don't want that there. So the intent is, that an owner can, put air in their tires and change a filter, do whatever, but it's not intended as a mechanic. We won't sell or lease a space to a body shop, a tire repair. We don't want those types of uses. It doesn't complement what we're trying to put in place there. We're trying to keep it an upscale storage type of facility.
Thank you.
I want to answer your question before, just with respect to storing vehicles, fuel, and things like that. Our experience with the fire department, and we check with them again, there's no issue with that. They're ventilated, the units, and just like your garage at home, you'd pull a car into there, with the fuel in it. It's the same thing here. Many of the older vehicles, they actually shut the fuel off on these vehicles, but there's no issue with that. The driveway is open on the end, so it's actually ventilated, but each of the units have ventilation as well.
Commissioner Woods.
Will you be making any improvements to the landscaping?
The building was just remodeled and re-landscaped here just recently, so the owner, we're scheduled to close escrow in a couple weeks, but the current owner bought this and the building next door, Rip Curl building next door in a portfolio, and they went through and have remodeled the entire building, gutted it, put a brand new parking lot in, all new landscape, painted the building, roof, and so many of the things we were going to do to the building have been done, and actually we did them in conjunction. They consulted with us on many of the landscape plans and stuff, so everything in there has been redone as of just recently. They just restriped it. There's some electric car charging units up in the front. So it's, the building looks like brand new from the outside now.
Okay, thanks.
Anyone else? So just a quick question. So when you say change a filter, you don't mean an oil filter, do you?
No, I'm just saying that there's no mechanical, we don't want any mechanical.
Air filter, cabin filter, I get it. Yeah, okay.
Whatever. I mean, there's no mechanical that's intended for that. Okay. And to answer your question about the car wash too.
Yeah, I was going to ask you how your Westlake car wash works. Do you have one?
We don't have one. I mean, I think it was misconstrued. We actually pulled it, but it didn't get pulled. We're not doing a car wash on site here. All we wanted to do is many of the buildings in the city, you have 5 different car wash guys, mobile car wash guys that are there constantly, and they wash wherever.
They have closed
we don't
systems,
want that. So we want to designate, if there's going to be a mobile car wash person that's there, they're going to wash a car in a particular area. We don't want, today it's here and then it's over there. So we would just designate. They're going to have to meet all the requirements of the typical car wash that the city has. Most of these owners have their own car wash people because they're very particular about their collections, and they have their own detail people that prepare cars for shows. So all we're going to tell them is if you're going to wash it there, it's got to be done in this area, and you've got to meet the requirements based on their car wash people.
Got it. Thank you. Yeah. Okay, I will open this for public comment. Anybody wish to speak on this item, please come forward. Okay, seeing none, we'll close public comment. I trust you have said everything you'd like to say tonight on your application. Okay, I will bring it back up to the dais, see if there's any final questions. Okay, I will close the public hearing and ask the commissioners if there's any motions or comments. Okay, seeing none, I am going to make a motion to approve planning application 19-07, subject to conditions of approval, and it, as well as and that includes the alternative condition proposed by staff for condition number 6, limiting the on-site events to 4 times a year with a maximum attendance of 200 people, with the addition of the CMCC section 9-205 through 9-208, and also a modification of engineering condition number 28, where the applicant shall dispose of vehicle wash water through a zero discharge closed loop water recycling system.
Mr. Chairman?
Yes.
For condition number 5, let's see, starting at the end of the second line, it says or towards any landscape areas. I think that should be stricken as well if you're taking that out of condition 28.
Yes, it should be. Thank you with that change. And also find that the project is categorically exempt from the provisions of California Environmental Quality Act, per CEQA Guidelines Section 15301, existing facilities.
I'll second.
Okay, there's a motion and a second. Any discussion on the motion?
Not so much a discussion. I'll just say I think this looks like a very appropriate use of the land here. Again, I appreciate the kind of investment that we're getting in Costa Mesa. I can't help but point out that we seem to have everything in the city. I mean, we have real hard community neighborhood type issues you'll deal with. We have luxury car storage. You may have one opinion about that or another, but I think it's a testament to the fact that we do have a very diverse economy here. We have a diverse population. It seems like there's a demand for this, and looks like a well-designed project. So I'm very grateful for your investment here.
Concur. Call for the question.
That motion carries 5-0.
Okay, and that decision becomes final in 7 days unless appealed to the City Council. Thank you, gentlemen. Good luck. Okay, so that brings us to staff reports. Mr. Curtis, anything in Development Services?
Nothing this evening, Mr. Chairman.
Okay. Mr. Mejia, anything under Public Services?
None tonight.
Okay, and Mr. City Attorney?
Nothing, Chair.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, everyone, for attending. Commissioners, thank you for a really good meeting, I thought. You guys all did great work and asked great questions, and we looked at all those issues with a lot of examination, I guess. So we'll stand adjourned until the April 8th, 2019 meeting. Good night.